Before we drift away, don't forget to like the video and subscribe for more calming sleep stories. Sweet dreams await. The rain hadn't stopped for 3 days. Thick gray clouds hung over the town of Elmsbrook like a sagging tarp stretched too long, heavy with secrets. The kind of rain that didn't crash or thunder, but whispered endlessly, a steady hiss on rooftops, soaked leaves, and hollow roads. The trees along the edge of town bowed with the weight of it, the dense pine forest looking darker than usual, its shadows pulling longer even in the pale light of mid-afternoon. On the third day, Mara received the letter. She found it on her doorstep, soaked through but carefully wrapped in an oily kind of waxed paper, almost antique. No stamp, no return address. Just her name written in careful, looping script across the front, Mara Whitlock. Her fingers hesitated around the envelope. Her name wasn't common. Few people even knew she lived here, let alone exactly where. She glanced around. No footsteps in the mud, no car tracks on the gravel. The woods at the edge of her yard stared back, unmoved. Inside, the fireplace crackled, the only warmth in the small rental cabin she'd taken when she'd come to Elmsbrook a month ago. She hadn't expected to stay long. It was just meant to be a pause, time away from her old life, from city noise and headlines that mentioned her name too often. Mara peeled the envelope open slowly. The paper inside was a strange, fibrous material, like it had been made by hand. The ink had run slightly, but the words were still legible. They don't forget. The forest remembers. If you're reading this, it's already started. Stay away from the trail when the fog rises. And whatever you do, don't answer when it calls your name. No signature. Nothing else. She read it 3 times, heart tapping faster with each pass. At first, she thought it was a prank. Maybe a weird local tradition, some kind of joke they pulled on outsiders who rented cabins. But something about the message clawed at her. She could feel it under her ribs. The phrasing. The way it felt too personal. She set the letter down and looked out the front window. The trees on the other side of the dirt road stood like watchers, unmoving in the downpour. There was a fog curling low at their roots. It was early for it, usually fog came with the morning. But this one had crept in early, like it had somewhere to be. That night, Mara couldn't sleep. She sat by the fire with a cup of tea gone cold, watching the windows. The storm had let up, but the rain still whispered, just like before. The fog was thicker now, pressing up against the trees, swirling between the trunks. From her living room, she could barely see the wooden trail sign that marked the start of the old forest path. It was half covered in moss, its paint faded from years of neglect. Locals had warned her once, early on. An old woman at the market had said it in passing, like a joke, don't go wandering down that trail after dusk. Not unless you want to meet the ones who never left. She'd laughed at the time. Now, she didn't. At 2:12 a.m., something scraped against the side of the house. Not like a branch or a raccoon, but slow. Deliberate. Like fingertips brushing wood. Mara sat up straight, every part of her body tensing. She waited. Nothing. Then, tap. 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 3 soft knocks on the front door. Her breath stopped in her chest. Who the hell would be out here now? She crept to the door and peered through the peephole. Nothing. Just darkness and fog. The porch light barely reached beyond the railing. She flipped the lock quietly and opened the door a crack. The cold mist pressed in immediately. And sitting on the doormat was another letter. This time, the envelope was black. No wax paper. Just a single red thread tied around it. She didn't touch it right away. She looked out toward the road. Still nothing. No movement. No sound, except for the rain falling gently through the leaves. Heart pounding, she brought it inside. The thread fell away as soon as she picked it up. Inside the envelope was a torn scrap of an old map. No writing. Just a hand-drawn trail, marked in thick ink that bled outward like veins. At the end of the path, circled twice in dark charcoal, was a word, hollowing. And beneath it, another note. You've been called. The pines remember. Mara stared at the page for a long time, the fire crackling low beside her. Outside, the fog curled against the windows like breath. She should have left then. She should have packed her bag, driven back to the city, and forgotten Elmsbrook ever existed. But she didn't. Because somewhere deep down, she felt it. The forest was waiting for her. And something had already started. Mara didn't sleep at all. She tried, once. Just after 4 in the morning, when the sky had begun to hint at a pale, colorless dawn. She lay on the couch in the quiet, the map and notes folded tightly under a heavy book on the coffee table, the fire gone to low embers. But even with her eyes shut, her breathing slowed, and a blanket pulled tight around her, something in the air refused to let her drift. It was a feeling. Not fear exactly, not yet. More like something just beneath fear, a pressure in the gut, a sense that the world around her had tilted by a fraction, and if she moved too fast, she might fall through. By the time the light outside the windows turned gray-blue and the birds began to stir softly in the trees, she was still wide awake, heart quietly ticking. At 6:37 a.m., Mara stood at the edge of the front porch, one hand gripping the wooden post, eyes locked on the forest across the road. The fog hadn't lifted. It usually did by sunrise. That was something she'd noticed about Elmsbrook. The mornings cleared fast, especially after rain. But this mist clung low and thick, curling around the trees, hiding the forest floor. The trail sign was gone, swallowed in white. She couldn't even see the first few feet of the dirt path. She looked down at her boots. She'd already dressed, jeans, a thick sweater, rain jacket. A flashlight in one coat pocket, the black envelope in the other. The map was tucked into her phone case, which she'd wrapped in a plastic zip bag just in case. She wasn't entirely sure why she was doing this. Maybe it was curiosity. Maybe it was something else. A kind of gravity she couldn't explain. Or maybe she just wanted answers. Before stepping off the porch, she paused and looked up at the trees. They were still. Completely still. Not even a breeze moved their needles. Mara crossed the road. The trail began as a narrow dirt path carved into pine needles and old roots. It wound between massive trees that rose like ancient towers, their trunks marked with old scars, slashes of bark missing, strange symbols carved in places too high for a knife to reach without a ladder. She walked slowly, keeping her steps light, careful not to trip. The deeper she went, the quieter it got. Even the birdsong faded. There were no crunches of animals in the underbrush, no buzzing of insects. Only the soft thud of her boots and the occasional drip of rainwater falling from a high branch. The fog swallowed sound. It curled around her legs, hovered at chest height, blurring the trees ahead and behind. At the 15-minute mark, Mara stopped. There was something ahead in the mist. She stood perfectly still, eyes narrowed, trying to make sense of the shape. It looked like a person. Not moving. just standing in the middle of the trail, facing her. Her breath caught. She took a small step back. "Hello?" she called, voice unsure. The figure didn't respond. She raised her flashlight and flicked it on. A pale beam sliced through the fog, and the figure vanished. Not stepped away. Not turned. Vanished. The path was empty. Mara's fingers gripped the flashlight tighter. Her breath came out shaky. She wasn't hallucinating. She knew what she'd seen. Someone, or something, had been there. She pressed on. Another few minutes and the trees began to change. They leaned closer together, their limbs tangled in strange ways, forming twisted arches above the path. Thick vines dangled from branches like ropes, many of them frayed at the ends. Mara shivered. She wasn't cold, not really. But there was something about the air now, it tasted metallic, stale. Then she heard it. A single footstep behind her. She spun around fast. Light up. Nothing. Just the empty trail disappearing into fog. She turned forward again. Another footstep, this time ahead. Then another behind her. Slow. Heavy. Not leaves or animals. Bootfalls. Mara's pulse kicked into high gear. She held her breath, listening. Then, softly, from somewhere too close in the trees. Mara. Her name. Whispered so faintly it might have been the wind. But the wind didn't speak. And it didn't know your name. She turned and ran. Branches scraped her coat. Roots snagged her boots. The flashlight beam bounced wildly, cutting slashes of light through the fog. The trees around her grew tighter, closer, almost deliberate in how they leaned inward. She didn't stop until she stumbled into a clearing, wide and circular, with a single rotted stump in the middle. The fog swirled around it, leaving the center strangely open. She dropped to one knee, gasping for breath, wiping sweat from her brow. Her heart thudded like it wanted out. When she looked up again, she saw the tree. It stood on the far side of the clearing, taller than the rest, its bark jet black and slick, almost wet. Carvings covered it from base to branch, deep spirals and interlocking runes she didn't recognize. And beneath it, tied to the trunk with red thread, was another envelope. She stepped toward it slowly. The envelope was thick and cold, sealed shut with a strip of charcoal-colored wax. Her hands trembled as she opened it. Inside was a photo. An old Polaroid, water-damaged but still visible. It showed a group of 6 people standing in front of the same tree. All of them smiling. All of them wearing hiking packs. She recognized one of them immediately. It was her sister. Emily. Dead for 4 years. Mara staggered back, breath catching in her throat. She stared at the photo again. It couldn't be. Emily had died in a car accident. That's what she was told. That's what the funeral had been for. That's what she buried. And yet here she was. Standing in front of the black tree in a forest Mara had never been in before. Alive. And smiling. The photo slipped from Mara's fingers and fluttered to the wet ground. Behind her, the trees creaked. And the fog began to move. Not drift. Move. Like it was alive. Like it was circling. Closing in. The fog didn't just hang in the air, it prowled. It curled around the trunks of trees like fingers, stretched in slow tendrils across the clearing, and wrapped itself around Mara's ankles with the softness of breath and the weight of something far more alive. She backed away from the black tree, her boots crunching over wet leaves and moss-slick roots, heart thundering so loud she could hear it in her ears. The Polaroid photo still lay face up in the dirt, Emily's frozen smile blurred slightly by the moisture soaking into the paper. The others in the picture, 5 faces unfamiliar to Mara, were half-faded, their eyes catching the flash like small mirrors. None of them looked afraid. That terrified her more than anything. They should have looked afraid. Something about the black tree was wrong on a level she didn't have words for. It radiated a presence, not just visual, but something she felt in her bones. Her thoughts, normally crisp and quick, had slowed in its presence, thick like syrup. Her skin prickled, her breath turned shallow. It was the kind of unease that screamed, "You're being watched." And then it moved. Not the whole tree, but a shift, a sway, even though the air was still. Its bark seemed to pulse, just once, as if the trunk had taken a breath. The runes carved into it shimmered faintly, a soft dull red beneath the damp surface. Mara's mind screamed to run. But her feet, as if caught in old roots, refused. Behind her, the forest groaned, a long, slow creak like an ancient door swinging open somewhere deep in the trees. And then, from behind the tree, a sound. Whistling. Low. Melodic. A haunting, circular tune that wound back on itself like a spiral. It wasn't cheerful. It was deliberate. Patient. A lullaby for something that didn't sleep. Mara slowly turned her head. The figure stepped from the fog. It was tall, dressed in rags soaked through with water and earth. A hood covered its face entirely, long and pointed like the beak of a plague mask, but made of stitched bark and shadow. Around its neck hung a string of bones, animal, maybe. Or not. In one hand, it held a wooden flute. And it was still whistling. The tune drifted toward her, curling into her ears like smoke. And with each note, Mara felt her legs weaken, her mind tugged toward numbness. Step back. Move. Don't listen. She ripped her gaze away and stumbled backward. Her heel struck a root and she nearly fell, catching herself on the stump in the center of the clearing. The music stopped. She looked up. The figure was gone. Only the black tree remained, its bark now completely still. The fog receded slowly, like something disappointed, withdrawing its reach. Mara stumbled out of the clearing, her legs shaky, her breath shallow, gripping the nearest trunk for balance. She didn't know how far she'd come or how long she'd been in the forest. It was still daylight, technically, but the light filtering through the canopy was dark, greenish, and cold. Somewhere deep in the woods, something laughed. She made it back to the cabin just before the sun dipped beneath the treetops. Mara slammed the door behind her and locked it, then bolted it for good measure. Her clothes were damp with sweat and mist, her palms scraped and her knees aching from the fall earlier. She collapsed on the couch and stared at the ceiling for a long time, the image of the tree burned into her mind. That tree, she was sure of it, was the Halloween. The place circled on the map. The name etched in the charcoal script. But what was it? A burial site? A shrine? A gate? Her thoughts raced in jagged spirals. But one thing she couldn't shake, not for a second, was her sister's face. Emily. Alive. In that photo, she hadn't just looked alive. She looked content. Like she was meant to be there. But Emily had never mentioned coming to Elmsbrook. never said a word about hiking or wilderness trails. In fact, she'd been terrified of the woods. They reminded her of something from childhood Mara had never fully understood. A memory flashed, Mara at age 12, Emily crying in her bed after a school camping trip. "The trees talked to me," she'd whispered that night, shivering under the covers. "They said they wouldn't forget." Back then, everyone assumed she'd just had a nightmare. Now Mara wasn't so sure. She unfolded the map again. The ink was dry but smelled faintly of something chemical, like burned sugar and mildew. The hand-drawn trail twisted and wound its way deeper into the woods, past the hollowing. Beyond that, no more landmarks. Just the curling edge of the paper, burned along the border. But at the bottom, something new had appeared. Words she swore hadn't been there before. To remember the forgotten, follow where the roots are blackest. The roots are blackest. Her eyes flicked toward the fireplace. The log she brought back from the trail the week before, the one she'd thought was ordinary pine wood, was darker than the rest. Almost black. The bark had peeled slightly at the edge, revealing something beneath that looked like old rope or veins. She got up slowly and poked at it with the fireplace iron. It hissed. Not the snap of sap or the crackle of wood. A hiss. Long and quiet. Like a breath behind glass. Mara stepped back, her hands shaking. Suddenly, the fire dimmed. Not in color or strength, but as if the light itself pulled inward. Shadows stretched across the room unnaturally, deeper than they should have. The corners of the cabin darkened. And then, in the far window, faint, but unmistakable, a face. Pale. Pressed to the glass. Watching. Mara froze. The face didn't move. Just stared. Its mouth didn't open. Its eyes didn't blink. But the skin was too smooth, too still, like wet clay left out in the rain. She blinked once. The face was gone. That night, Mara didn't sleep. The fire never warmed the room. And just before midnight, the forest whispered her name again. Not once, but 3 times. The whispers started just after midnight. Mara sat in the center of her small living room, all the lights on, the fire burning low again but still alive, and her back pressed to the wall as though proximity to solid things could anchor her. The window shades were down, every curtain drawn, but she could feel the forest outside, feel it, not just as trees and wind and damp ground, but as a presence. A pressure in the bones. A weight in her ears. Like being watched by something too large to see all at once. And then the whisper came. Her name, again. Mara. She clenched her jaw. It was soft, sliding just under the edge of audible, as if it came from beneath the floor or through the walls. It didn't sound angry. Worse, it sounded curious. Mara. She rose slowly and stepped toward the fireplace. The log from earlier still smoked, black sap oozing slightly at the edges, like veins leaking dark blood. It hadn't burned all the way through. It hissed softly, not with flame, but something deeper. And as she stared at it, she heard it again, not a voice this time, but a sound. A scratch. Slow, deliberate. From beneath the floorboards. Scratch, scratch, scratch. Her breath caught. She knelt down and pressed her ear to the wooden floor. At first, nothing. Then, faint and muffled, came the unmistakable sound of movement. A shuffle. A soft dragging. And then the sound of nails across wood again. She stood, grabbed the iron poker from the fireplace, and moved to the far corner of the room, near the old trapdoor and the floorboards. She'd noticed it on her first day in the cabin. A square of uneven wood beneath a dusty rug. She'd assumed it led to an old root cellar, one of those long-forgotten spaces common in rural cabins. She'd never opened it. Never needed to. Until now. The whisper came again. Right beside her ear. Mara. She gritted her teeth, bent down, and pulled back the rug. The hatch lay beneath, nailed shut with 4 thick, rusted iron nails, driven straight into the beams. Not normal nails, black iron, coarse and hand-forged. Not the kind you could find at a hardware store. Whatever was down there, someone had gone to great effort to seal it in. Or seal it out. She didn't want to open it. She was going to anyway. The iron poker wasn't sharp, but it was strong. She wedged the tip under one of the nails and pushed. Hard. It groaned and creaked. Finally, with a wrenching sound, the nail twisted out and rolled onto the floor. The whisper stopped. She hesitated. Was that good or bad? One by one, she removed the other 3. Then, holding her breath, she pulled open the hatch. A wave of cold air flooded the room. Not just cold, wrong. The kind of cold that wasn't just a temperature drop, but a shift in the feeling of things. Like entering a house just after something awful happened inside it. It was a silent kind of violence. A wooden ladder descended into darkness. She shone her flashlight down. The beam didn't reach the bottom. Just old stone walls, some of them weeping water. The space below looked like it hadn't been touched in decades. She descended. The cellar was wider than she expected. The ladder dropped her into a chamber of packed dirt and stone, ringed with old shelves filled with canning jars long gone to rot. The walls were carved with old markings, some looked like letters, others like symbols, circles inside spirals inside jagged lines that bled into one another. In the center of the cellar was a table. No, not a table. An altar. Small, made from stacked stones. On top of it sat a bowl, carved from a single piece of dark wood, its edges cracked with age. The bowl was full. Not with water. With pine needles. Dozens of them. All black. As Mara stepped closer, she saw something else nestled among the needles. Teeth. Human. Small. Yellowed. Carefully arranged like an offering. She stepped back too fast, bumping into the wall, and that's when she saw the door. It was at the far end of the chamber. Half buried behind loose boards and a crumbling shelf. A door made of heavy wood and bound in rusted metal, like something that should have belonged to a crypt. There was no handle. Only a keyhole. She stepped closer. The air around the door was colder. Thicker. She tried to shine her light through the keyhole, but all she saw was black. Not just dark, but wrong, like the light couldn't pass through. As she turned to leave, she noticed something etched into the inside of the door, just above the keyhole. A name. Emily. Mara didn't remember getting back up the ladder. She moved like a ghost, limbs numb, eyes wide, chest too tight to breathe properly. When she surfaced in the cabin, it was somehow morning again, pale light slipping through the shades, birds chirping as though none of this had happened. She closed the hatch and dragged a chair over it. Then she sat by the fire and stared at the floor, the word Emily burned into her thoughts. Her sister had never been buried. That's what the funeral director had said. The body had been too damaged, the accident too severe. It was a closed casket. Mara had accepted that. Grieved through it. But now she wasn't sure a body had ever been returned at all. And what if Emily hadn't died in a crash? What if the letter wasn't a warning, but a summons? Later that afternoon, the fog returned, thicker than before, and someone left another envelope at her doorstep. This time, it was sealed with a splinter of bone. Inside, a new message. She's still here. Beneath the roots. Bring what was hers. Underneath that note, a second page, an old photo of Emily as a teenager, wearing her favorite silver necklace. The one Mara kept in her drawer upstairs. She stared at the photo, numb, the whisper echoing again, this time inside her own head. The forest remembers. And maybe, just maybe, so did Emily. Mara didn't speak for the rest of the day. She sat by the fire, unmoving, the photograph clutched in one hand and the letter in the other. The silver necklace, Emily's, lay on the table, where Mara had placed it moments after retrieving it from the small wooden jewelry box in the upstairs bedroom. She hadn't even remembered she brought it. It was just there, in the drawer, tucked beneath folded clothes like it had followed her to Elmsbrook on its own. Outside, the forest pulsed with fog, so thick now that Mara could barely see the porch from the window. It wasn't natural. It didn't roll or drift like normal mist. It hung in layers, like gauze soaked in something heavy, shifting and curling around the edges of her vision. And in that fog, there were sounds. Not animals. Not wind. Voices. It began again just after dusk. Mara had dozed off in the armchair, the photograph still in her lap, the letter tucked into the book on the table. The fire had burned down to coals, a faint orange glow casting long shadows across the floor. The light outside had vanished entirely, swallowed by the pine curtain beyond the road. A noise stirred her. A soft crack, like a branch snapping just outside the window. She opened her eyes slowly. The room was darker than before. Colder. Another snap. Then a whisper. Faint. Sliding in through the fireplace like smoke. Mara. She sat up, her spine stiff from the nap, her hands numb. She didn't move at first. Didn't want to. Mara. This time the voice was different. Higher. Softer. Familiar. She stood and moved to the window, lifting the edge of the curtain slowly. Beyond the porch, the fog churned. And then, movement. A figure. No more than a shape at first, standing where the trail began, half concealed by the mist. A pale dress. Bare arms. Long, dark hair. Mara's heart stuttered. She leaned closer to the glass. The shape tilted its head. Then it spoke. Mara, it's me. The voice was Emily's. Exactly the way it had sounded before the accident. Mara's breath caught. She stepped back from the window. Her legs trembled. The world tilted slightly, as if the cabin had shifted on its foundation. She had imagined this, right? It couldn't be real. But the voice came again, closer now, directly outside the door. I need you, Mara. Please. I'm cold. And then a single knock. Soft. Gentle. Not the way a stranger knocks. The way a sister would. Mara didn't move for a full minute. Every instinct in her screamed to stay away. To not open the door. To hide. to pretend none of this was happening. But there was another feeling, too deep and old. Guilt. Love. Hope. She moved to the door and placed her palm against it. The wood was cold. "Emily," she whispered. Silence. She slowly turned the lock and opened the door a crack. The fog pressed inward immediately. The porch beyond was empty. No footsteps. No figure. Just the hollow sound of the forest breathing. She stepped out. The fog parted slightly, revealing the trail sign beyond the road. And at its base, something new, another envelope, pinned beneath a small stone. Mara picked it up, hands shaking. No seal this time, just a single strip of cloth tied around the middle. Pale blue. Emily's favorite color. Inside, a short note. "Follow the path you walk together. Bring the necklace. She remembers you." And beneath that, something else, a page torn from a journal, the ink smeared and wet, the handwriting unmistakably Emily's. The hollowing is not a place. It's a memory. A space between. "I saw their faces last night in the trees. They don't speak. They listen. I think I'm part of it now. But I'm not afraid, not of them. Only of forgetting who I was. I hope you remember me. If anyone finds this, tell Mara, tell her I tried to come back." Mara's knees gave slightly, her breath hitching in her chest. Tears welled in her eyes, blurring the words on the page. Her sister, her Emily, had been here. Maybe she still was. Alive? Changed? Trapped? She didn't know. But she knew one thing. She couldn't ignore this any longer. She packed quickly. A flashlight, a knife, a lighter, a canteen of water. She slipped the necklace into her coat pocket and folded Emily's journal page into the front of her bag. As the sun dipped fully beyond the horizon and the forest was drowned in mist, Mara crossed the road and stepped once again onto the path. This time, the trail was different. It no longer felt like it looped through a natural forest. It curved too precisely. The trees leaned in with deliberate angles, their branches forming archways overhead like ribs. The ground beneath her feet was spongy, wet, almost warm. And as she walked, the fog whispered. Not words. Not voices. Memories. She heard them like faint echoes behind glass, Emily's laughter, a door closing from their childhood home, the creak of a swing set from summers long gone. And then, beneath all that, a different sound. Crying. Faint and low. Just ahead. She followed it, moving carefully, until the trail widened into another clearing. This one was different from before. Wider. Colder. The trees around its edge bent inward as if leaning to hear. In the center stood a stone well, old and crumbling, half buried in moss. And someone sat beside it. A figure in a white dress, knees pulled to her chest, hair hanging over her face. Crying. Mara stepped closer. Emily. The figure stopped. Lifted her head. And smiled. But it wasn't Emily's smile. Not really. Too wide. Too still. And behind her eyes, something else. Something that wasn't human anymore. The figure stood slowly. Her mouth opened. And the forest whispered all at once, dozens of voices overlapping, crashing like waves. She remembers. Do you? Mara stumbled back. The figure took a step toward her. and the well behind her began to breathe. The sound coming from the well wasn't wind. It wasn't animal or water or any natural thing. It was breathing. Inhale. Exhale. Inhale. Exhale. Slow. Deep. Rhythmic. Mara stood frozen at the edge of the clearing, eyes locked on the girl by the well. Or the thing that wore Emily's face. It still looked like her, same dark hair, same pale skin, same small frame. But the mouth didn't move right when it smiled. The eyes didn't blink. The angles were all slightly wrong. As if someone had studied Emily in photographs and built a mannequin to resemble her, but didn't quite understand what made a person real. And now that figure was walking toward her. Each step was deliberate. Slow. The white dress brushed against the wet grass, leaving no footprints behind. The air grew colder, and Mara's breath came out in short, white bursts. "You came," the figure said. The voice was soft, musical. And still, it was Emily's. But behind the tone, there was a distortion. A subtle echo, like another voice riding beneath it. Mara's hands clenched into fists at her sides. "What are you?" she whispered. Are you her?" The figure tilted its head, smiling again. "I'm who you remember." The well behind her pulsed, another long breath in, another out. The moss-covered stones rattled slightly with each exhale. The sound was wet, like lungs coated in water. Like something breathing through a flooded mouth. The figure extended her hand. "You brought the necklace." Mara nodded slowly, unwilling to speak. Her coat pocket felt impossibly heavy now, as if the silver chain weighed more than it should have. Her fingers brushed the metal. It felt cold. Colder than ice. "What happens if I give it to you?" she asked. The figure didn't answer. Instead, her hand dropped to her side and she stepped closer. Just one step, but it was enough for Mara to smell the thing's breath. It wasn't Emily's scent. It was soil. Rot. Waterlogged leaves. Something old, buried, unearthed. Mara took a shaky step back. "I want to help her," she said, voice stronger now. "But not if it means giving something else you want." "What are you really?" The figure blinked. Once. Slowly. And then, without warning, it collapsed. Just dropped to the ground like a marionette with cut strings. Mara startled backward, stumbling into the underbrush. The figure didn't move. Didn't breathe. And then, it twitched. Jerked upright on its knees. Its head lolled backward, mouth wide open in a silent scream. From its throat poured a thick cloud of fog. But this fog was darker. Grayer. It hissed as it flowed upward, and within its spirals, Mara saw faces. Dozens of them. Some screaming. Some silent. Some laughing. All drifting upward from the thing that had worn her sister's body. Then, just as suddenly, it stopped. The figure collapsed again, this time, flat to the earth. Still. The breathing from the well slowed. Shallow now. Then silence. Mara didn't move for a long time. She stood there, one hand gripping the handle of her flashlight, her legs rooted to the ground like the trees themselves. Only when the last tendril of fog vanished into the canopy did she finally force herself to step forward. She moved toward the well cautiously, one eye still on the crumpled body in the grass. The well was ancient. The stones worn and slick. No bucket, no rope. just the hollow mouth gaping wide beneath the moss. She leaned over slowly, raising the flashlight to shine downward. The beam vanished into blackness. She couldn't see the bottom. No walls. No reflection. Just endless dark. Then, scraping from deep below, Mara held her breath. Another scrape. Metal on stone. A shuffling. Then, a voice. Mara. Not a whisper. A cry. Desperate. Her sister's voice. Mara, I'm here. I'm trapped. It's me. Her breath caught. The flashlight shook in her hand. Where are you? She shouted into the well. Down here, Emily sobbed. I'm cold. I don't know how long it's been. Please help me. You're the only one who remembers. How do I get to you? Silence. Then. Bring it. Bring the necklace. Drop it in. It'll open the rest. The rest? Mara's heart pounded. This sounded like Emily. She sounded real. Not like the thing from before. But something didn't feel right. The ground beneath her feet pulsed faintly, like it was part of something larger. A throat. A living thing waiting to swallow. She pulled the necklace from her pocket. The silver glinted in the low light, delicate and perfect. This was yours, she said aloud. You wore it every day until the crash. Until they said you were gone. From the well. I'm not gone. She looked at the necklace. And for a moment, just a flash, she saw something reflected in its surface. Not herself. A room. Stone walls. A door. A figure crouched in the corner. Dirty. Thin. Holding their knees to their chest. Emily. Real. Alive. Trapped. Mara's breath hitched. Her hand moved. Then stopped. Because behind that reflection, just a flicker, was something else. A shadow. Tall. Watching. Smiling. She stepped back. No, she said. The voice from the well turned harsh. Give it to me, it snarled. You called. You remembered. That's the price. Mara backed away further. If Emily's really down there, I'll find another way. I'm not feeding you. The well screamed. The ground shook. The trees bent backward as if recoiling from the sound. Mara turned and ran. She didn't look back, even as the breathing resumed, louder now, more frantic, more monstrous. The path behind her cracked and split. Roots erupted from the soil. The air filled with whispers. You were warned. You were called. You remember. And now, it remembers you. She burst from the forest into the clearing behind her cabin just as the first light of dawn began to cut through the fog. She didn't stop. She ran straight into the cabin, slammed the door, and threw the lock. She collapsed on the floor, the necklace still in her hand. Behind her, in the fireplace, the blackened log cracked open, and something inside it moved. The morning light crept into the cabin, weak and gray, filtered through the thick fog that still clung stubbornly to the edges of Elmsbrook. Mara lay on the cold wooden floor, the silver necklace heavy in her palm, the pulse of dread still hammering in her chest like a trapped bird beating against cage bars. She could hear nothing except her own ragged breathing and the faintest creak from the fireplace behind her. She dared not move. The blackened log, once just a piece of dead wood, had shifted slightly while she was curled in exhaustion. Now a faint crack had appeared across its charred surface, a narrow split that hadn't been there the night before. The sound was soft, almost too quiet to hear, but unmistakable. It was the sound of something stirring. Her fingers trembled as she reached out, the cold iron poker resting against the hearth as her only defense. Slowly, cautiously, Mara leaned forward. The log's crack widened, revealing a glimpse of dark, wet flesh underneath, something organic, alive. She swallowed hard and pulled back. The log groaned. A thin plume of smoke rose, smelling not like burning wood, but something older and fouler, like decayed roots dragged from the earth and soaked in ash. Suddenly, a hand shot out. Pale. Thin. Bone-white fingers grasping frantically at the edges of the firebox, leaving wet streaks on the soot-blackened bricks. Mara screamed and stumbled backward, crashing against the wall. The hand disappeared. Then another appeared, then two. A pair of hands clawed free, pulling a thin, emaciated figure from the hearth. It was a girl. No older than a child, perhaps 8 or 9, with tangled hair matted with dirt and pine needles, and eyes wide with terror. Her skin was as pale as winter frost, almost translucent, veins dark beneath the surface. She shivered violently in the cold cabin air. Mara's heart nearly stopped. Who are you?" she whispered, voice shaking. The girl blinked slowly, then spoke in a voice barely above a whisper. "I'm the last." "The last what?" Mara asked, kneeling and offering her hand. The girl flinched but didn't pull away. "The last, remember." Her eyes flicked to the fireplace. "I was trapped in the blackened heart. The place where they forget. The hollowing." Mara's mind reeled. The hollowing. The black tree. The well. All pieces of the same terrible puzzle. "How long were you down there?" The girl's lips trembled. "I don't know. Time doesn't move there. It's a place outside the world. Between roots and earth and memory." She shuddered. I heard her voice. Emily's. She tried to call me back. But I escaped. I remember. Mara took a shaky breath. "I've been trying to find Emily. She's trapped in the well." The girl's eyes darkened. "The well is a mouth. It eats memories, feeds on what's forgotten. Your sister, she's not lost. She's changed. Part of the forest now. Part of the hollowing. How do I save her?" Mara asked urgently. The girl looked away, fear shadowing her face. "You can't. Not entirely. The forest takes what it wants. But you can bring her back, bring her part of her. You need to offer what was hers, what she left behind." Mara clenched her jaw. "The necklace?" The girl nodded slowly. "Yes. But that's not enough." She reached into her tattered dress and pulled out a small bundle wrapped in cloth. "This too." Unwrapping it, Mara saw a handful of pine needles, black and brittle, and a single, tiny tooth, yellowed and cracked. "What is this?" Mara asked, confusion growing. "A piece of her," the girl said. "The last fragment the forest let me keep." Mara looked down at the necklace in her hand. "I'll take this to the well." The girl nodded, but her eyes warned her. "Be careful. The forest remembers everything. And it wants to remember you." That afternoon, Mara prepared for the journey back. She packed supplies carefully: water, food, a knife, matches, and wrapped Emily's necklace and the bundle from the girl in a small cloth pouch. The fog had lifted, but the forest remained heavy with silence. No birds sang. No animals stirred. The path was slick with rain and shadows. As Mara stepped onto the trail, the girl followed silently behind, moving like a ghost. The deeper they walked, the heavier the air grew, until the trees seemed to close in on every side, their branches forming a dense canopy that blocked out the sun. Mara felt the weight of unseen eyes watching, waiting. The forest whispered in languages she couldn't understand. Hours later, they reached the clearing with the well. The blackened figure was gone. Only the well remained, silent and gaping like a wound in the earth. Mara approached slowly, heart pounding. She untied the pouch and held it over the well. "Here," she whispered. "For Emily." She dropped the necklace, the pine needles, and the tooth into the darkness. A cold wind spiraled up from the depths, and the ground trembled beneath her feet. The well exhaled, a breath like a storm. The forest seemed to hold its breath. And then the water at the bottom of the well glowed, a faint, eerie blue. Mara watched in awe and fear as the glow spread upward, illuminating the ancient stones. Suddenly, a voice echoed from the depths. "Thank you, sister." Mara's heart clenched. "Emily." The voice was faint but real. "I'm here. I'm waiting." The forest around them stirred. The trees bent low, leaves brushing against Mara's face like whispered secrets. The girl's voice came softly. "The Hollowing has accepted her return, but the price is not paid." "What price?" Mara asked. "The forest demands a sacrifice, a memory, a promise, a piece of yourself to seal the bond." Mara's mind raced. What would she give? Her life? Her sanity? Or would the forest take more? As night fell, the fog rolled back in, thick and suffocating. Mara and the girl camped beside the well. The forest whispered around them, calling, waiting. And Mara realized the journey was only just beginning. Night had deepened its hold on the forest by the time Mara and the pale girl, who still hadn't told her name, settled near the ancient well. The fog had thickened again, pressing in on them like a living shroud, muffling the sounds of the world beyond the trees. The fire Mara had made crackled feebly, struggling against the damp, smoky air, casting flickering shadows that danced like restless spirits on the gnarled bark of the pines. The girl sat cross-legged beside Mara, eyes distant and glassy, watching the fire with a hollow intensity. "You don't know my name," Mara said softly, breaking the heavy silence. The girl smiled faintly, a ghost of a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "I'm called Lila," she whispered. "But it's not really my name anymore. It's what the forest lets me be." Mara nodded, understanding too well how names could fade, slip away in places like these, forgotten like memories lost beneath thick layers of earth and shadow. The night pressed closer around them. The well loomed like a dark, yawning mouth just a few feet away, its surface still glowing faintly with that eerie blue light from earlier, as if it breathed in rhythm with the forest itself. Mara's mind churned with the girl's words, the price the forest demanded to reclaim her sister. What kind of sacrifice? Mara asked, fingers tightening around the pouch holding the necklace and the strange bundle. Lila's eyes flicked toward the well, where the shadows seemed to ripple unnaturally. "It's not always clear. Sometimes the forest wants a memory, one you hold dear, something that defines you. Sometimes it wants a secret, something you've hidden away so deep you barely remember it yourself. And sometimes, it wants more. Mara shivered despite the fire's warmth. More like what? The girl's gaze darkened, the faint glow of the well reflecting in her eyes. Like a promise you didn't know you made. Like a piece of your soul. The weight of that hung between them like a thick fog. I don't know what I can give, Mara admitted. You'll know, Lila said quietly. The forest will show you. Hours passed with little else said. The fire died down to embers, and the mist thickened until the trees around them vanished in a swirl of gray. Then, just as Mara's eyelids began to droop, a soft rustling stirred the leaves behind the well. She jolted upright. Did you hear that? Lila nodded slowly. The forest is waking. It's testing. From the depths of the well came a sound, low, like the distant growl of some ancient beast stirring from slumber. Mara's heart hammered. She pulled the pouch close, feeling the cold metal of the necklace against her palm. Then, without warning, the ground beneath them trembled. The earth cracked open, thin fissures spiderwebbing across the dirt and rocks. From the cracks, thin tendrils of black roots slithered out, curling toward them like serpents hungry for warmth. Mara scrambled backward as the roots reached up, brushing her boots, wrapping around her ankles. She kicked and pulled, heart pounding with panic, but the roots gripped tighter, pulling her down. Lila stood calmly, eyes closed, murmuring words that sounded like a language lost to time. The roots retracted slowly, releasing Mara just as suddenly as they had grabbed her. The forest is demanding, Lila said, voice steady but distant. It's trying to claim you. Mara's breath was ragged, her limbs trembling with adrenaline. She looked at the well again. From its glowing depths, a voice, soft and sweet, whispered. Remember. 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 The word echoed inside Mara's head, spinning like a cyclone of memories and emotions. Suddenly, her mind was flooded. Scenes from her childhood, the laughter of her and Emily running through the sunlit woods near their old home, the smell of pine and earth after rain, the warmth of their mother's kitchen, the sharp sting of loss when Emily died. Among the memories, one stood out sharply. A promise. Long forgotten. A secret promise Mara had made as a child, buried deep beneath layers of guilt and grief. She had sworn to protect Emily. To never forget. To never leave her alone. The forest was calling her back to that promise. Lila's voice broke through the whirlwind. You see it now. The price is remembering what you forgot. Mara knelt by the well, pulling the necklace and bundle from the pouch. I'm ready. She dropped the items into the well. The glow pulsed brighter. The ground trembled again. And the forest whispered 1,000 voices all at once, rising in a crescendo. You remember. You pay the price. Suddenly, a searing pain shot through Mara's chest, like icy fire ripping through her ribs. She gasped, clutching her heart. Her vision blurred. Then darkness. When Mara opened her eyes, she was no longer by the well. She stood in a forest that was not quite real. The trees were taller, monstrous in scale. The fog hung like a curtain, but inside it, shadows flickered. Whispering. Mara saw faces in the mist, faces of those who had been lost, forgotten, claimed by the hollowing. Some smiled. Some wept. Some reached out with skeletal hands. And there, among them, was Emily. Standing still, eyes hollow but glowing faintly. Mara. The voice was both her sister's and not. Thank you for remembering. Mara stepped forward, heart full of hope and fear. I'm here. and the forest closed around her. The moment Mara stepped through the fog, the air changed. It thickened around her like liquid, cold and heavy, pressing against her skin and seeping into her lungs with every breath. The scent of pine and damp earth was still there, but beneath it ran something deeper, something ancient and sorrowful, like the earth itself was weeping. She blinked, trying to clear the haze from her eyes. The trees towered impossibly high above her, their trunks like pillars holding up the sky. Their bark was gnarled and blackened, twisted with strange runes glowing faintly with an eerie, bluish light. The canopy was so dense that no sunlight could break through. Instead, the forest was bathed in a dim, ghostly glow that seemed to come from nowhere and everywhere at once. Voices echoed through the trees, not spoken words, but murmurs, sighs, laughter, and cries all woven together like a dark symphony. Mara's heart thudded in her chest. She was no longer in the forest she knew. This was the hollowing itself. In the distance, a figure waited. Emily. But she was different here. Her eyes glowed faintly, an unnatural light illuminating their depths. Her hair floated as though underwater, and her skin was pale, almost translucent. Mara's throat tightened. Emily, she whispered. The figure smiled, a smile that was both warm and chilling. You came. I brought you back, Mara said, stepping closer, trying to hold on to the memory of her sister as she had known her. Emily tilted her head. Back? She asked softly. I'm not sure that's what happened. The forest doesn't give things back. It changes them. Then what am I supposed to do? Mara asked, desperation creeping into her voice. You're here because you remembered, Emily said, voice echoing like a melody caught in a breeze. Because you remembered, the forest opened this place to you. But now, you must decide what you're willing to lose. Mara's eyes darted around. The mist thickened, swirling, shapes forming and dissolving in the haze, faces of those long forgotten, trapped in this twilight realm. I don't understand, Mara said. Emily's gaze grew distant. The hollowing is not a place but a threshold, she explained. Between worlds, between time, between memory and forgetting. Here, the past lives alongside the present. Here, those lost find a home, though it is no home at all. Mara swallowed hard. And me? You are a visitor now, Emily said, stepping closer. A memory bearer. You can cross back to the world you know. Or you can stay and become part of the hollowing. But if you choose to stay, you must give something in return. Mara's breath hitched. What do you want from me? Your memories. The trees around them shivered. The ground beneath Mara's feet pulsed softly, like a heartbeat. The whispers rose to a chorus. Remember, forget, remember, forget. Mara's mind flooded with images, fragments of her life, moments she'd held dear, slipping like sand through her fingers. Faces of friends, laughter, the smell of rain on dry earth, the warmth of her mother's kitchen, Emily's smile on sunny days long gone. She felt herself slipping away. Her memories were the price the forest demanded. Emily's voice softened. You don't have to lose everything. Only what you're willing to give. Mara's fingers clenched, holding tight to the silver necklace in her pocket, the last tangible connection to her sister, and to the life she hoped to return to. Is there a way to bring you back? To save you and not lose myself? Emily's eyes gleamed. There is always a way. But it is never easy. You must find the heart of the hollowing, the blackest root, the deepest shadow. There, the past and present are bound. There, you will find the truth. Mara nodded, determination blooming. Where is it? Emily reached out, brushing Mara's cheek gently. Follow the roots. Follow the whispers. But beware, the deeper you go, the more you become part of the forest. Suddenly, the ground shook violently. Mara stumbled, grabbing a tree for support. The trees groaned, and from the mist emerged shadowy figures, wraith-like shapes with glowing eyes and twisted limbs. They circled, silent and watchful. They are the forgotten, Emily warned. Those who lost their memories completely, trapped between worlds. They will try to take yours. Mara's heart raced. I'm not afraid. Emily smiled sadly. You should be. Mara turned toward the darkest part of the hollowing, where the runes glowed brightest and the fog was thickest. The roots beneath her feet seemed to pulse with energy, guiding her forward like a living path. The forgotten watched her from the shadows, their empty eyes tracking every step. With every breath, Mara felt memories slipping away, faces, names, places blurring like a fading photograph. But her grip on the necklace tightened. The forest whispered secrets, ancient and cruel, promising power, reunion, or oblivion. Mara pressed on. For Emily. For herself. Hours passed in this twilight realm. Time was fractured, seconds stretching into eternity. At last, Mara reached a colossal black root twisted around a massive stone. It pulsed with dark energy, veins glowing with blue light, like the heart of the forest itself. The whispers crescendoed. Remember. 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 Mara knelt and placed her hand on the root. Images flooded her mind, Emily's crash, the funeral, the loneliness that followed, the dreams of the forest calling her sister home. A voice echoed. Give us your memory of her. Let the past live here. Mara hesitated. The price was clear. The choice was hers. She closed her eyes and let the memories flow. She saw Emily's laughter on a sunny day. Her last smile. The promise Mara made long ago. As the memories poured into the root, the forest's glow intensified, and the forgotten faded away, their eyes closing like candles snuffed out. The black root pulsed once more, then released a gentle warmth. Mara opened her eyes. Emily stood before her, whole, real, and shining with light. Thank you, Emily whispered. Mara smiled through tears. Welcome home. The forest sighed, and the fog lifted. The trees bowed as Mara and Emily walked hand in hand toward the edge of the hollowing, their path home. The moment Mara and Emily stepped beyond the threshold of the hollowing, the world seemed to tilt and blur, like the moment between waking and sleep. The dense forest, shrouded in fog moments before, began to clear. Trees thinned, the light shifted from that ethereal blue to the warm, golden hues of dawn. Birdsong timidly returned, and somewhere deep in the distance, a woodpecker began its steady tapping. Mara blinked, feeling the cold mist melt away from her skin. She squeezed Emily's hand tightly. Her sister's fingers were warmer than she remembered, trembling slightly but alive, real. For a moment, everything was silent, and the world felt fragile, as if the slightest breath might shatter the spell. Is this really happening? Mara whispered, her voice barely more than a breath. Emily looked around, eyes wide and unsteady. I don't know, she replied, voice soft. I've never been here before. Mara searched her sister's face. It was the face she had carried in her heart all these years, but something lingered beneath, something hollow, as if part of Emily was still lost in the depths of that twisted forest realm. I'm here now, Mara said firmly. We're going home. The trail they followed wound back through towering pines, their needles dripping with early morning dew. The forest floor was soft beneath their feet, scattered with fallen leaves and tangled roots. Yet the air was heavy, thick with unspoken warnings. As they walked, Mara felt an unshakable sense of being watched. Shadows slipped just beyond her vision, fleeting movements that vanished when she turned her head. The silence was broken suddenly by a low, rumbling growl from behind. Mara spun around, heart pounding. The fog thickened again, swirling into shapes, long limbs and glowing eyes. The Forgotten. The wraith-like figures from the hollowing had followed them, crossing the boundary between worlds. Mara stepped in front of Emily, pulling the knife from her pack. Her hands shook, but she held it steady. "Stay behind me," she ordered. The Forgotten closed in slowly, their forms flickering between solid and smoke. One reached out, claws scraping the bark of a tree, releasing a sound like shattered glass. Mara held her breath. "Why are they here?" Emily asked, fear tightening her voice. "Because the forest never forgets what you take," Mara said grimly. The creature's eyes burned with hunger, not for flesh, but for memories. One by one, they circled closer, whispering fractured fragments of voices, snatches of Mara's childhood, pieces of her past woven with Emily's memories. Mara gritted her teeth. She had traded some memories for Emily's return, and now the forest wanted more. The leader of the Forgotten, a towering figure cloaked in shifting shadows, stepped forward. Its voice was a rasping echo. "You carry the burden of remembering. The forest claims what is owed. Give us what you cannot lose." Mara's fingers tightened on the knife's handle. "I won't let you take my memories." "You have no choice," the shadow hissed. "The price is due." Suddenly, the ground beneath Mara cracked open, thick roots twisting and writhing like serpents. She stumbled but caught herself on a tree. The Forgotten advanced. In a desperate move, Mara grabbed a fallen branch and struck out, the wood splintering as it connected with one of the shadowy forms. The creature shrieked, dissipating into a mist that vanished on the wind. But more came. Emily's eyes filled with tears. "There has to be a way to stop them." "There is," Mara said, voice steady despite the fear. "But it means going deeper into the hollowing, finding the source. The heart of the forest." Emily nodded, wiping her tears. Together, they ran, weaving between trees as the Forgotten gave chase. They reached a clearing where the ancient black root Mara had touched earlier emerged like a gnarled hand from the earth. Here, the energy was thick, almost unbearable. The glowing runes pulsed brighter. Mara knelt and pressed her palms against the root, feeling the pulse of the forest's dark heart. "We have to bind the forest's hunger," she said. "Seal it." Emily searched the pouch they had carried, pulling out a small knife, the one Mara had brought from the cabin. Together, they carved a circle in the dirt around the root. Mara recited the words Lila had whispered earlier, a chant of memory and binding, lost language that sounded like wind through leaves. The roots writhed violently but did not break the circle. The Forgotten screamed in frustration, their forms flickering between solidity and smoke. As the last word left Mara's lips, the ground shook violently. A burst of blue light exploded from the root's core, blinding and pure. When it faded, the forest was still. The Forgotten were gone. The fog lifted completely. Mara looked at Emily. Her sister's eyes were clear now, whole. They hugged, the long years of loss and fear melting away in the embrace. "You saved me," Emily whispered. "We saved each other," Mara said. They walked home together, the forest behind them peaceful and still, the trees whispering farewell. The sun broke through the canopy, warming their faces. For the first time in years, Mara felt hope. But as they reached the edge of the forest, Mara's gaze lingered on the shadowed tree line. Because she knew the forest would always remember. And so would she. Mara and Emily's footsteps fell softly on the mossy forest floor as they made their way back to the edge of Elmsbrook, the village where they had grown up. The early morning sun filtered weakly through the thinning mist, dappling the path with pale light, a stark contrast to the dark shadows that had clung to them only hours before. Though the forest had momentarily released its hold, the air still felt heavy with secrets and the residue of ancient sorrow. For Mara, every step away from the hollowing was a step back into a world she once knew, but no longer recognized. The village was quiet, too quiet. Windows shuttered, doors bolted. Mara's heart sank as she noticed the peeling paint on the abandoned houses and the rusted sign hanging crookedly above the general store. "Where is everyone?" Emily whispered, clutching Mara's hand tightly. "I don't know," Mara admitted, scanning the empty streets. The eerie stillness was unsettling. There was no chatter, no laughter of children playing, no creak of rocking chairs on porches. Only silence. Mara led Emily toward the old town square, hoping to find some sign of life. At the center stood the ancient clock tower, its hands frozen at 3:13. Time had stopped here, or at least refused to move forward. A cold chill ran down Mara's spine as she realized that the village itself was caught in some kind of limbo, a place where the world beyond the forest had not quite caught up with reality. They reached the village church next, its heavy wooden doors shut tight. Mara tried the handle, locked. Her breath caught. "Maybe they left," Emily suggested, voice barely a whisper. "Or maybe something's keeping them away." Mara's mind raced back to the warnings Lila had given her about the forest's hunger, about memories lost, promises broken, and the price paid in silence. Suddenly, a low moan echoed from the shadows of the churchyard. Mara spun around, pulling Emily close. From behind a crumbling gravestone emerged a figure, hunched, ragged, eyes sunken deep into its skull. It moved with a staggering gait, limbs twisting unnaturally as it dragged itself toward them. "No," Mara gasped. "Not again." The figure was one of the forgotten, those lost souls trapped between memory and oblivion, cursed to wander in endless twilight. Its hollow eyes locked on Mara, its voice a rasping whisper. "You remember. You cannot forget. The hollowing calls you back." Mara gripped Emily's hand tighter. "We're not going back," she said, voice trembling but resolute. The creature's mouth twisted into a ghastly smile. "The forest never forgets. And neither shall you." Mara and Emily ran through the deserted streets, the forgotten limping behind, gaining ground despite their grotesque movements. They ducked into an old bookstore, the door creaking shut behind them. The dusty shelves smelled of forgotten stories and aged paper. "We need answers," Mara said, searching through the cracked spines for anything that might explain this nightmare. She found a leather-bound journal, its cover etched with symbols she recognized from the runes in the hollowing. Flipping through the brittle pages, Mara read aloud. "The hollowing is a place where memories are preserved, twisted, and claimed. It feeds on those who remember what should be forgotten. Those taken by the forest become its servants, shadows bound by loss and pain." Emily shivered. "Is there a way to free them?" Mara's eyes darkened. "Only by breaking the cycle of memory and sacrifice." Outside, the moaning grew louder. The forgotten had followed them to the bookstore, pounding on the windows, their voices a chorus of grief and rage. Mara's mind raced for a plan. She recalled the chant Lila had taught her, words of binding and release. "We have to try," she said, grabbing Emily's hand. Together, they began to recite the ancient words, their voices trembling but growing stronger. The runes on the journal began to glow faintly. Outside, the pounding stopped. The forgotten retreated, their forms dissolving into mist as the first light of dawn broke over Elmsbrook. As silence returned, Mara and Emily stepped outside. The village remained empty, but the oppressive weight lifted. For now. Mara knew the forest's hold was not over. The hollowing was still alive. And it was still waiting. The village of Elmsbrook lay shrouded in a fragile silence, the morning sun casting long, hesitant shadows over empty streets and shuttered windows. Though the immediate threat of the forgotten had faded with the dawn, a heavy unease settled in Mara's chest, a warning she could not ignore. The hollowing had not been defeated. It had only drawn back, waiting for the right moment to reclaim what it considered its own. Mara and Emily made their way toward the town's edge, toward the small cottage of old Thomas, a man known to be the village's unofficial keeper of stories and secrets. He was the last living link to Elmsbrook's forgotten past, a recluse rumored to have survived his own brushes with the hollowing. If anyone could offer answers, it was him. The path was littered with fallen leaves and broken branches, remnants of a storm that had passed during the night. As they approached the crooked little house, Mara's steps slowed. The air around the cottage felt different, charged, almost alive with anticipation. Emily glanced at her sister, uncertainty in her eyes. "Do you think he'll help us?" Mara nodded, though her heart was heavy. "We need to find out what we're truly dealing with." The door creaked open before they could knock, revealing old Thomas. His face was weathered, eyes sharp but tired, framed by wild white hair and a tangled beard. Despite his age, there was a strength in his posture, a resilience born of years surviving the forest's dark whispers. "I heard you might be coming," he said, voice gravelly but steady. Mara stepped inside, the dim interior smelling of old wood, herbs, and smoke. The walls were lined with shelves cluttered with ancient books, jars of strange ingredients, and faded photographs of the forest. Thomas gestured to a worn armchair near the hearth. "Sit. There's much you need to know." For hours, Thomas spoke, weaving a tapestry of history, myth, and warning. He told them of the hollowing's origins, a rift in the earth formed centuries ago when a terrible ritual went wrong, tearing a hole between the world of the living and a shadow realm where memories were trapped and twisted. "The forest feeds on memories," Thomas explained. "It remembers those who enter, but it also hunts those who remember too much. It's a place where the past refuses to die, and the forgotten scream to be heard." Mara listened, absorbing every word. The weight of the forest's hunger pressed down on her like a physical force. Thomas's eyes darkened. "Your sister's return is a blessing, and a curse. The forest's grasp is long, and it will not let go easily. How do we stop it?" Mara asked, voice steady despite the dread knotting her stomach. "You can't stop the hollowing," Thomas said quietly. "But you can make a bargain with it. A binding. Offer it something precious in exchange for your freedom." Emily's face paled. "Like what?" Thomas hesitated, then reached under the table to pull out a small wooden box carved with the same glowing runes Mara had seen in the forest. "This," he said. "The heart of the forest's binding. Inside lies the seed of the old magic that created the hollowing. It can seal the rift, but only if you are willing to sacrifice what you hold most dear." Mara's breath caught. The necklace, the memories, the promise. the price they had already begun to pay. Thomas's gaze bore into hers. The forest is patient. It waits for the right moment to claim what it is owed. If you do not act soon, Elmsbrook will become lost to the hollowing forever. The weight of his words settled over Mara like a storm cloud. She glanced at Emily, whose eyes were shining with unshed tears. "We'll do whatever it takes," Mara said, voice firm. Thomas nodded. "Good. But beware, the path will not be easy. The forest will test you in ways you cannot imagine." Night fell outside the cottage, the wind rising to howl through the trees. Mara sat by the hearth, the wooden box resting heavy in her hands. Emily lay curled on a blanket nearby, exhausted but safe, for now. Mara's thoughts raced, haunted by the forest's whispers and the faces of the forgotten. She understood now that the battle was far from over. The hollowing was a living thing, a force of memory and loss that demanded a price beyond imagination. And Mara feared what they might have to give. As the fire sputtered low, Mara looked out the window into the dark woods beyond. The trees swayed, as if breathing in the night air. And somewhere deep within the shadows, the forest waited. Remembering. The cold night air pressed against Mara's skin as she stepped out of old Thomas's cottage, the wooden box tucked tightly beneath her coat. The moon hung low, a pale lantern casting silver light through the thick canopy overhead. The forest beyond the village whispered in the wind, the voices barely audible but unmistakable, a chorus of distant memories, half-remembered promises, and unseen eyes watching from the shadows. Mara's grip tightened on the box as she followed Emily's slow, uncertain steps toward the edge of Elmsbrook. The village still felt suspended in time, caught between the living and the forgotten. Somewhere deep in her gut, Mara knew that the forest's hunger was far from sated, and the hollowing's grip was tightening like a noose. They reached the boundary where the mossy ground gave way to thick, tangled roots that twisted like giant serpents beneath the surface. Here, the air was heavier, charged with a strange energy that prickled the skin and tugged at the heart. Mara knelt beside the largest root, the one old Thomas had called the heart of the forest's binding. Its black bark was slick with moisture, veins pulsing faintly with an eerie blue glow. She opened the wooden box slowly. Inside lay a seed, small, dark, and almost alive, pulsing softly with an inner light that seemed to breathe with the forest's rhythm. Emily watched silently, her eyes wide with a mix of fear and hope. "Is this really going to work?" Emily asked, voice barely above a whisper. "It has to," Mara said. "It's the only way to seal the hollowing's rift and stop the forest from consuming everything." Mara reached out, pressing the seed against the root's surface. The forest seemed to hold its breath. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the ground trembled beneath their feet, low groans echoing through the trees like the forest itself was awakening. Roots around them writhed, twisting upward like grasping hands. A sudden chill filled the air as shadows slithered between the trunks. Mara stood, pulling Emily close as the darkness deepened. Shapes began to emerge from the mist, forms familiar and terrifying, the forgotten, the lost souls caught between worlds. They circled the sisters, their hollow eyes glowing with an unnatural light. "You bring the seed," one whispered, voice like dry leaves scraping stone. "But the forest demands sacrifice." "We're ready," Mara said, voice steady despite the fear coiling in her chest. "Not ready enough," another hissed. "The forest wants your memory of her. The promise you made. The love you hold." Mara's breath hitched. The weight of the forest's hunger pressed on her mind, threatening to unravel the fragile threads of her memories. The shadows closed in. Mara and Emily backed toward the root heart, the glowing seed pulsing brighter. "Hold on to me," Mara said, taking Emily's trembling hand. Together, they began to chant the ancient binding words taught by old Thomas. The runes on the seed flared, casting a pale light that pushed back the darkness. The forgotten screamed, a sound of lost time and broken promises, as the shadows retreated into the mist. The root pulsed once more, and then split open, swallowing the seed into its core. The forest sighed, a long, deep breath that shook the leaves. For a moment, silence. Then the fog lifted. The air lightened. The oppressive weight of the hollowing lifted, replaced by a fragile peace. Mara looked at Emily, tears of relief streaming down her face. "It's over," she whispered. Emily smiled weakly. "For now." But as they turned to leave, Mara noticed something strange. The necklace she had kept close, the last link to her sister, was gone. Her heart clenched. "The forest always remembers," Lila's voice echoed in her mind. "And it always takes what it is owed." Mara knew the price was not paid in full. The hollowing had been sealed, but its hunger remained. And the forest's shadows would return. The dawn crept slowly over Elmsbrook, casting soft golden light across the sleeping village. The oppressive weight that had hung over the town for weeks seemed to lift, but Mara knew better than to believe the nightmare was truly over. The forest had always been patient. It took what it wanted, when it wanted. And it was still watching. Mara and Emily walked silently through the village, their footsteps echoing on empty streets. The air was crisp, carrying the scent of pine and damp earth, but beneath it lay something else, a subtle trace of smoke, and a faint metallic tang Mara couldn't place. Her fingers instinctively went to the empty spot around her neck where the silver necklace used to rest. The necklace, the last link to her sister's past, was gone. Taken by the forest, a reminder that some debts remained unsettled. They made their way back to the cabin on the edge of the woods. It stood alone, surrounded by towering pines that stretched endlessly toward the sky. Mara pushed open the creaking door, the familiar scent of wood smoke and moss greeting them. For the first time in weeks, the cabin felt like a refuge. Emily sank into a worn armchair by the hearth, exhaustion pulling her under. Mara busied herself with lighting a fire, the flames flickering warmly but failing to chase the cold from her bones. As the fire crackled, Mara's thoughts turned to Lila, the pale girl who had appeared from the hearth and warned them of the forest's hunger. Where was she now? Had she escaped the hollowing completely, or was she still trapped somewhere in the roots and shadows? The quiet was shattered by a soft tapping at the door. Mara froze. No one had come to the cabin in days. Cautiously, she opened the door a crack. There, standing in the morning mist, was Lila. Her pale face was drawn, eyes wide and haunted. "I'm back," she whispered. "The forest, it's not finished." Mara stepped aside to let her in. "What do you mean?" she asked. Lila's voice trembled. The hollowing's heart beat still. The binding seed, it slowed the spread, but it did not stop it. The forest remembers your promise. It wants more. Mara's chest tightened. The price they had paid was only the beginning. Lila pulled from her cloak a small, twisted branch wrapped in black vines. "This is a token," she said. "A piece of the hollowing's root. It's alive, connected to the forest's will. If you carry it, you are bound to the forest forever." "Bound how?" Mara asked, dread pooling in her stomach. "You will hear its whispers in your mind. Feel its hunger in your blood. And when it calls, you must answer, or lose yourself to the hollowing." Mara glanced at Emily, who nodded slowly, understanding the gravity of the situation. "What do we do?" Emily asked. Lila's eyes darkened. "You fight. But the forest is patient. It waits for you to falter. To forget. To let go." Days turned into weeks. Mara and Emily lived in a fragile balance, the forest's whispers never far from their thoughts. The twisted branch pulsed with dark energy, a constant reminder of the bargain they had made. Mara's dreams were haunted by shadowed faces and broken promises. She saw glimpses of the forgotten, reaching out with skeletal hands, begging for release, or vengeance. The necklace was gone, but its absence was a wound Mara carried deep within her soul. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and the forest darkened, Mara heard a voice calling her name. Soft. Urgent. Mara. She followed the sound into the woods, the twisted branch burning cold against her skin. The trees seemed to close around her, branches reaching like fingers, shadows lengthening. "Come," the voice whispered. She pushed forward, heart pounding. In a small clearing, bathed in silver moonlight, stood Emily, but not the Emily she knew. This Emily's eyes glowed with an otherworldly light. Her smile was sad. "The forest calls me," she said. "And I must go." Mara reached out, tears streaming. "No. You promised you'd stay." "I did," Emily said softly. "But the forest never forgets." The hollowing was not done with them. Its shadows lingered. Its hunger remained. And Mara knew their fight had only just begun. The night air was thick with fog as Mara stood alone at the edge of the clearing, her breath visible in the cold. The twisted branch from the hollowing pulsed faintly against her chest, a relentless heartbeat she could neither escape nor ignore. The weight of the forest's hunger pressed down on her, heavier than any stone she had ever carried. Somewhere deep inside, the voices of the forgotten echoed, whispers of sorrow, regret, and longing, calling her back into the darkness. Emily's glowing eyes haunted her mind. The sister she had fought so hard to save was slipping away, pulled by a force older than time itself. Days earlier, when Emily first spoke those chilling words, Mara felt the ground shift beneath her feet. The promise they had made, sealed in blood and memory, was unraveling faster than she could grasp. "The forest calls me," Emily had said, voice trembling but resolute. "I won't let it," Mara had replied, desperation thick in her throat. But Emily had only smiled sadly. "You can't fight a shadow that remembers everything. I'm part of the hollowing now." Mara had spent restless nights by the cabin hearth, the flickering firelight throwing her own shadow against the walls, twisting and dancing like the spirits of the forest. She wondered what Emily truly meant. Was her sister trapped between worlds? Was she slowly fading, becoming one with the hollowing? Every memory Mara had sacrificed to the forest clawed at her sanity. The necklace was gone. The seed had been planted. And still, the forest whispered. One night, the whispering grew louder, voices threading through Mara's dreams like a suffocating fog. She awoke to find the twisted branch glowing brighter than ever, its black vines writhing like living things. Without thinking, Mara clutched the branch and stepped outside into the forest, the mist curling around her ankles like smoke. The trees leaned in, their branches reaching as if to grasp her soul. She followed a path she did not recognize, guided by the pulsing light of the branch and the eerie voices that called her name. The deeper she ventured, the more the forest seemed to close around her, the canopy thickening until no stars pierced the night sky. Suddenly, she came upon an ancient tree, larger than any she had seen before. Its bark was cracked and glowing faintly with the same runes she had encountered in the hollowing. Roots burst from the earth, tangled and blackened, pulsing with dark energy. Mara knelt and placed the twisted branch at the base of the tree. "I offer you this," she whispered. "Take it, and leave my sister be." The forest seemed to hold its breath. Then the ground trembled. A deep voice echoed through the woods, neither male nor female, old as the earth itself. "The price is not yet paid." Mara's heart froze. "What more do you want?" "A promise." "I give you mine," she said firmly. "I will protect Emily. I will carry the burden." The voice was silent for a long moment. Then it spoke again. "Very well. But remember, promises made in shadow bind forever." As Mara rose, the forest around her began to change. The trees shifted, their bark growing lighter, the mist thinning. She felt a flicker of hope. But it was fragile, easily broken. Returning to the cabin, Mara found Emily sitting by the fire, eyes now dimmer, less glowing, but filled with sorrow. "Did you make the promise?" Emily asked. "Yes," Mara replied. "Then the forest may spare me, for now." Emily reached out, taking Mara's hand. "But promises are heavy." "I know," Mara said, squeezing her sister's hand tightly. In the days that followed, Mara found herself caught between two worlds, the village slowly waking from its trance, and the ever-looming presence of the hollowing just beyond the trees. She was bound to the forest by the promise she made, carrying the weight of memories lost and sacrifices yet to come. The necklace was gone. The past was buried. And the future was uncertain. But Mara would fight. For Emily. For Elmsbrook. For the memories that still remained. Days slipped into weeks with a slow, creeping dread that settled over Elmsbrook like a thick fog. Though the village's people had begun to stir from their enchanted slumber, a deep unease clung to the air, as if the forest itself was holding its breath, waiting for the next move in a game that had already been played many times before. Mara could feel it in every rustling leaf, every whisper of wind. The hollowing was awakening, gathering strength in the shadows, its hunger far from sated. The promise Mara had made lingered in her mind, an invisible chain linking her to the forest's ancient heart. She had vowed to protect Emily, but with every passing day, that vow felt more like a weight dragging her down, threatening to pull her into the depths alongside the forgotten. The twisted branch she had planted at the ancient tree remained embedded in the earth, pulsing faintly, a beacon and a barrier, fragile and impermanent. One evening, as twilight bled into night, Mara stood at the edge of the woods, staring into the dense darkness where the trees converged like a cathedral of shadows. Her breath formed clouds in the cold air. She knew what awaited her there, the whispered calls of the hollowing, the spectral eyes watching from beyond the veil. "Mara," the voice came soft and urgent, carried on the wind. She turned sharply, heart pounding. Emily emerged from the mist, her steps hesitant, eyes clouded but determined. "You should not come here," Mara warned. "It's not safe." "I have to," Emily said, voice shaking. "The forest calls to me still. I feel it in my bones." Mara reached out, gripping her sister's arm. "We'll face it together." Together, they stepped into the forest's embrace, the world around them shifting with every step. The trees towered above, their branches tangled like grasping fingers. The ground was soft and uneven, carpeted with moss and fallen leaves. The scent of pine was thick, mingled with damp earth and something metallic, blood, or memory. "Do you hear it?" Emily whispered. "The voices?" Mara nodded. The forest was alive with whispers, fragments of old songs, forgotten names, laughter and tears woven into the very fabric of the woods. Suddenly, the forest grew darker, the mist swirling into shapes that twisted and coiled. The forgotten appeared, their eyes glowing with desperate hunger. They reached for Mara and Emily, their hands like brittle branches, faces half-formed and broken. "You promised," one of them rasped. "But promises can be broken." Mara raised her voice, chanting the ancient words of binding taught by old Thomas. The runes on the twisted branch pulsed fiercely. The forgotten screamed, recoiling as light pushed back the darkness. But as the shadows retreated, a new figure emerged from the mist, taller, more solid than the rest. Cloaked in darkness, eyes burning like embers. "You cannot hide from the forest's heart," it said, voice like grinding stone. "Your promise binds you, but the hollowing demands more." Mara's blood ran cold. The figure stepped forward, and the ground beneath them trembled. Roots erupted from the earth, twisting and writhing like serpents. The ancient tree Mara had planted the seed beside groaned, its bark splitting to reveal a hollow glowing with eerie light. "Come," the shadow commanded. "The hollowing's heart awaits." Mara glanced at Emily, whose hands were clenched tightly. "We have to go deeper," Mara said. "There's no turning back now." As they followed the shadow's lead, the forest seemed to pulse with dark energy, the whispers growing louder, more insistent. The path became treacherous, roots tangled like traps, the air thick with unseen eyes watching. Mara's mind raced with memories, the faces of those lost, the promises made, the sacrifices yet to come. The hollowing was alive, hungry, and patient. And it was coming for them all. Mara's footsteps faltered as the forest around her darkened to a shade that seemed almost unnatural, the dense canopy blotting out the last remnants of moonlight. The air grew colder, heavier, saturated with an ancient sorrow that seeped into her bones. Every breath she took felt thick with the weight of unseen eyes watching, waiting. Emily's hand tightened around hers, a fragile tether holding her to the world she knew, and to the sister she was desperate to save. They had followed the shadowed figure deep into the forest, where twisted roots and gnarled branches wove a labyrinth no map could chart. The path beneath their feet pulsed faintly with an eerie blue light, echoing the glow from the twisted branch Mara had planted days before. The heartbeat of the hollowing. Ahead, a massive tree towered above all others, its bark blackened and cracked, glowing faintly with ancient runes that pulsed like a living thing. Roots the size of rivers snaked from its base, burrowing deep into the earth, seeming to pulse in rhythm with the thudding in Mara's chest. This was the heart of the hollowing. The shadow figure stopped here, its ember eyes fixed on Mara. "This is where the forest's soul resides," it said, voice a grinding whisper. "The source of memory and loss. Here, the past and present are bound, and the price is paid." Mara swallowed, heart hammering. She knew what was coming. "What price?" she asked, voice trembling but steady. "What you offered was but a thread," the shadow said. "To seal the rift, a sacrifice must be made. One life for many, one memory for all." Emily's grip faltered. "No," she breathed. "You can still choose," the shadow said. "But the forest does not wait." Mara looked down at the twisted branch glowing faintly in her hand. The seed inside it pulsed like a heartbeat, and she felt the weight of the promise she had made, one that bound her to the forest's will. "What must I do?" Mara asked. The shadow pointed to the roots, which writhed and parted, revealing a cavernous hollow beneath the tree's massive trunk. "Enter," it said. "Place the seed in the heart. Offer your memories freely, and the rift will close. Refuse, and the forest will claim all." Mara exchanged a glance with Emily. Her sister's eyes were dark but resolute. Together, they stepped toward the hollow, the air growing colder, thick with whispers, memories of those long-lost, voices begging to be heard. Inside the hollow, the walls pulsed with the same eerie blue light, veins of ancient magic coursing through the wood. Mara could see faces flickering in the shadows, echoes of the forgotten, and hear the cries of those who had been claimed by the hollowing. With trembling hands, Mara placed the twisted branch at the center of the cavern. The seed within glowed brighter, sending tendrils of light weaving through the roots and into the earth below. "Give us your memories," 1,000 voices whispered. "Let the past live." Mara closed her eyes, feeling her mind flood with images, faces, names, moments from her life and Emily's. She held tight to the memory of their mother's smile, their childhood laughter, the promise she had made to bring Emily back. She felt herself slipping, memories unraveling like threads in the wind. "No," Emily said softly, taking Mara's hand. "Remember who you are." "I remember," Mara whispered. The cavern trembled as the seed absorbed the memories, pulsing with a light that grew until it filled the entire hollow. The ground shook violently, roots twisting and cracking as the forest's heartbeat slowed, then stilled. Outside, the fog lifted. The oppressive weight that had hung over Elmsbrook lifted like a breath released. Mara and Emily emerged from the hollow, the forest around them bathed in a new light. The trees seemed less menacing, the air lighter. The hollowing's hunger was stilled, for now. But the cost had been paid. Mara felt hollow where the necklace had been, a void where memories once lived. She looked at Emily, whose eyes were clear but sad. "We saved each other," Mara said. "But the forest never forgets," Emily replied. As they walked back through the forest, Mara realized their battle was not over. The hollowing's heart might be stilled, but the shadows lingered. And the forest would always remember. The forest seemed to breathe around Mara and Emily as they retraced their steps from the hollowing's heart. Though the oppressive weight had lifted, the atmosphere remained thick with a residual sorrow, as if the trees themselves mourned the sacrifice made within their roots. Mara's hands felt empty without the silver necklace that once rested there, a symbol of the memories now lost to the forest's hunger. Yet, despite the ache inside her chest, a fragile hope flickered in her heart. But the hollowing, she knew, was never truly gone. Back in the village of Elmsbrook, life was slowly returning. The sun touched the rooftops with warmth, birds sang tentative songs in the morning, and the townsfolk began to stir from their long, unnatural sleep. But Mara noticed the subtle shifts, conversations held in hushed tones, eyes darting toward the darkening woods, and an unease that clung to the air like a stubborn fog. One evening, Mara found herself alone in the town square as the sun dipped below the horizon. The air was cool, heavy with the scent of pine and damp earth. She could hear faint whispers carried on the wind, memories from the hollowing reaching out, reminding her that the battle was far from over. A soft crunch of footsteps made Mara turn. Standing before her was old Thomas, the village's keeper of stories, his eyes clouded but clear with purpose. "You did well at the hollowing's heart," he said, voice low. "The rift is sealed, for now." Mara nodded, the burden of the promise weighing on her shoulders. "But I feel like something's still wrong. The forest, it's still hungry." Thomas sighed deeply, settling onto a nearby bench. "The forest's hunger is endless. It feeds on memory, yes, but it also thrives on fear and regret. It will find new ways to claim its due." "What can we do?" Mara asked. "We must remember to resist," he said. "To hold on to what the forest wants to erase." and to protect those who still have a past worth fighting for. That night, Mara sat by the fire in the cabin, Emily resting beside her. The silence between them was heavy, filled with unspoken fears. "Do you think the forest will come back for me?" Emily asked quietly. Mara took her sister's hand. "I don't know. But we'll face it together. No matter what." The fire crackled, shadows dancing on the walls like ghosts from their past. Days later, Mara awoke to a strange stillness outside. The birds were silent, the usual morning breeze absent. A low mist crept through the village streets, curling around doorways and lampposts. Drawn by a strange instinct, Mara stepped outside, the cold air sharp against her skin. As she moved toward the edge of the woods, a figure emerged from the fog. It was Lila. Her pale eyes glimmered with a mixture of fear and urgency. "The hollowing stirs again," she said. "Its roots grow deeper, its hunger wider. The price will rise." Mara's heart clenched. "What do you mean?" "New memories will be taken," Lila explained. "And some will be lost forever." Over the coming weeks, strange things began to happen in Elmsbrook. People woke with gaps in their memories, names forgotten, faces blurred, moments that slipped away like water through fingers. The village itself seemed caught in a fragile balance, teetering on the edge of forgetting. Mara and Emily felt the pull of the forest grow stronger with each passing day. The promise Mara had made tethered them both, a lifeline and a chain. One night, as a storm raged outside, Mara sat by the window, watching lightning flicker across the sky. The twisted branch from the hollowing pulsed faintly in the corner, a reminder that the forest's hunger never truly slept. A soft voice whispered from the shadows. "Remember, Mara," it said. "The price of memory is eternal." Mara's eyes filled with tears. She understood now that some battles were not won with a single sacrifice. The hollowing was patient. It waited for cracks to appear, for memories to fade, for promises to weaken. And it would come again. The village of Elmsbrook stirred uneasily beneath a sky bruised with heavy clouds, the wind whispering secrets through the towering pines like ancient voices carried across time. Days after the storm's fury, the forest seemed to pulse with a restless energy, as if it was awakening from a long slumber to reclaim what was promised but never fully paid. Mara could feel it deep in her bones, the hollowing's hunger returning like a slow, creeping sickness that no flame could fully chase away. She stood at the edge of the village, her gaze fixed on the dark line where trees clawed at the horizon, shadows gathering beneath the heavy canopy. Emily was silent beside her, eyes distant and haunted, as if struggling to hold on to the fragile thread tethering her to the world of the living. "Do you feel it too?" Mara asked softly. Emily nodded, swallowing hard. "It's like a storm inside me, restless and cold." Mara reached out, squeezing her sister's hand. "We've fought this before. We can fight it again." But neither of them knew how many battles lay ahead, or what cost the forest would demand next. That evening, a gathering was held in the village square. The townsfolk, still shaken by the recent events, came together with lanterns and whispered prayers, hoping to find strength in unity against the creeping darkness. Old Thomas stood among them, a pillar of knowledge and resolve, while Mara and Emily watched from the sidelines, feeling both hope and dread intertwined. Thomas spoke quietly but firmly. "The hollowing feeds not just on memories, but on fear, regret, and silence. It thrives when we turn away from each other, when we forget the bonds that tie us." He looked directly at Mara. "The promise you made holds weight, but promises alone will not save us. We must remember. We must speak. We must share. As the night deepened, Mara felt the forest's presence grow stronger. The twisted branch, once dormant in the corner of the cabin, pulsed with a fierce urgency. The whispers grew louder in her mind, a chorus of lost voices pleading to be heard, remembered, and freed. Sleep evaded her, replaced by visions of shadowy figures reaching through the trees, eyes burning with hunger and sorrow. Faces from the past emerged, friends lost, memories stolen, promises broken. Days passed, and the forest's hunger grew bolder. Strange happenings became common in Elmsbrook. People found objects missing or misplaced, familiar paths seemed to twist into unfamiliar mazes. Shadows flitted just beyond sight, and the forest's whispers threaded into the wind like a haunting melody. Mara and Emily realized the hollowing was not content to wait quietly. It was gathering strength, preparing for a reckoning. One night, Mara awoke to the sound of cracking branches and rustling leaves outside. The wind carried a voice, soft, beckoning, and laced with ancient sorrow. She dressed quickly and stepped outside into the chill night air. The forest loomed before her, a dark sea of whispering shadows. "Mara," the voice called again. With a deep breath, Mara stepped into the darkness, the twisted branch glowing faintly in her pocket. Each step echoed with memories, both hers and the countless souls claimed by the hollowing. Deeper and deeper she walked, the forest closing around her like a living maze. Suddenly, the ground beneath her trembled. Roots erupted, twisting upward like grasping hands, and from the shadows emerged the forgotten, half-formed specters with hollow eyes and desperate cries. "Remember us," they pleaded. "Remember what was lost." Mara's voice rang out, chanting the ancient binding words. The glowing runes on the branch flared brightly, pushing back the shadows. The forgotten screamed, retreating into the mist. But as the last shadow vanished, a cold voice echoed through the trees. "This is only the beginning." Mara knew then that the hollowing was far from finished. The storm was gathering. And the fight for Elmsbrook's soul had only just begun. The morning after the gathering dawned gray and heavy, as if the sky itself bore the weight of the forest's sorrow. Mara sat by the window of the cabin, staring out at the pines swaying in a restless breeze. The twisted branch rested on the table before her, faintly glowing like a heartbeat, an ever-present reminder of the price paid and the promise yet to be fulfilled. Her mind churned with questions that had no easy answers. How many more memories would the hollowing claim? How many souls were still trapped, their whispers lost in the endless roots beneath the earth? And most painfully, what was the true cost of the promise she had made? Emily stirred in the next room, her footsteps soft as she entered the kitchen. Her eyes, though clearer than before, still held the distant look of one caught between worlds. "Mara," Emily said quietly, "I feel it, growing inside me. The forest's hunger isn't just outside. It's inside." Mara reached across the table, taking Emily's hand in hers. "We've come this far together. We'll find a way to fight it, to protect you, to protect all of us." Emily gave a small, sad smile. "I want to believe that. But the hollowing is patient. And it remembers every promise broken, every memory lost." Days passed in a tense rhythm, the village slowly regaining its routine but never quite shaking the shadow that hung over it. Mara and Emily worked with old Thomas to gather the villagers, teaching them the ancient words, encouraging them to share their stories openly, defying the silence the forest demanded. At night, Mara dreamed of the hollowing's depths, a vast cavern where lost memories swirled like smoke, faces flickering in the darkness, calling out for release. She felt the pull of those shadows, cold and insistent, tugging at her own fading memories. One evening, As the sun dipped low and the forest was bathed in golden light, Mara ventured to the ancient tree where she had planted the binding seed. The twisted branch throbbed with power in her pocket. The roots beneath the tree pulsed faintly, almost alive. She knelt and placed her hand on the bark, feeling the forest's heartbeat beneath her palm. Suddenly, the ground trembled, and a voice echoed from the roots. "The price is rising." Mara's breath caught. The hollowing demanded more than she had anticipated. As twilight fell, Mara returned to the village with a new determination. The fight was no longer just for survival, it was a fight to reclaim what the forest had stolen. She called a meeting in the square, where the villagers gathered with wary eyes and hopeful hearts. "We cannot let the hollowing consume us," Mara declared. "We must remember, together, and stand as one against the darkness." Old Thomas stepped forward, his voice steady and clear. "The forest's hunger feeds on fear and silence. Speak your truths. Share your stories. Only then can we bind the hollowing and protect what remains." That night, as the village sat around fires sharing tales of the past, laughter and tears mingling in the flickering light, Mara felt a fragile hope kindle within her. But she knew the hollowing was watching, waiting for the moment to strike again. As she lay in bed, the twisted branch pulsed softly on her bedside table. A whisper brushed her ear, soft, ancient, and filled with sorrow. "Remember, or be lost." Mara closed her eyes, steeling herself for the battles yet to come. The first light of dawn crept softly through the cracks in the cabin's wooden walls, casting pale ribbons of gold over the scattered pages of old Thomas's ancient books. Mara sat cross-legged on the worn rug, her hands trembling as she traced the faded symbols etched onto the twisted branch resting in her lap. The pulse of the hollowing echoed faintly beneath the surface, a low, steady rhythm that seemed to sync with her own heartbeat. Though the rift was sealed and the worst seemed behind them, Mara felt the unyielding weight of a lingering darkness, one that thrived not only in the woods but in the very marrow of those who had crossed its path. Emily lay curled on a blanket nearby, her breathing uneven as sleep fled her. Mara's eyes flicked to her sister's pale face, so fragile and yet so stubbornly alive, and a fierce determination kindled in her chest. The hollowing might hunger, but they had a weapon more powerful than any root or shadow, the bond between them. Mara rose, moving to the window to peer out at the forest's edge. The pines stood silent and stoic, their dark silhouettes outlined against the morning sky. Despite the seeming calm, Mara could almost hear the forest's whispered secrets, memories long buried, aching to be freed or consumed. Suddenly, a sharp breeze swept through the trees, rustling leaves and carrying with it a faint, haunting melody. It was a song she had heard in dreams, sung by voices both distant and familiar. The hollowing was calling again. Her resolve hardened, Mara prepared herself to venture once more into the heart of the forest. She wrapped the twisted branch securely in cloth and tucked it into her satchel alongside old Thomas's journals, filled with ancient lore and protective spells. Emily stirred, opening her eyes to meet Mara's gaze. "Where are you going?" Emily's voice was weak but steady. "Back into the hollowing," Mara answered. "We can't wait for it to come to us." Emily nodded, her expression a mix of fear and fierce trust. "Then I'm coming with you." Together, they stepped into the forest's embrace, the ground soft beneath their boots, carpeted with moss and fallen needles. The trees closed in around them, their branches weaving a vaulted ceiling that filtered the sunlight into dappled patterns. The air was thick with the scent of earth and decay, mingled with something sweeter, the faint trace of forgotten memories. As they ventured deeper, the whispers grew louder, voices threading through the air like fragile threads of silk. Mara felt a tug at her consciousness, images flickered at the edges of her mind, moments from her childhood, laughter and tears, the warmth of family dinners and the sting of loss. Each memory was precious, yet fragile, threatened by the forest's insatiable hunger. They reached the clearing where the ancient tree stood, the heart of the hollowing, its bark now scarred and cracked, the runes dimmed but still glowing faintly. Mara knelt, placing her hand on the root's rough surface. "It's weaker," she whispered. "But not gone." A sudden rustling in the underbrush made them both turn sharply. From the shadows emerged a figure, gaunt and spectral, yet unmistakably human. It was one of the forgotten, a soul trapped between worlds, its eyes pleading. "Help us," the figure begged. "Remember us." Mara's heart ached. The forest's hunger was not just for memories, but for redemption, for release. Drawing a deep breath, Mara began to chant the ancient binding words taught by old Thomas. The twisted branch pulsed in response, sending tendrils of light weaving through the roots and into the earth. The forgotten's form shimmered, growing clearer, until it smiled, a fleeting moment of peace before fading into the morning light. Emily reached out, placing a comforting hand on Mara's shoulder. "We're making a difference," she said softly. Mara nodded, though a shadow of doubt lingered. The hollowing was patient, and the price of memory was steep. As they made their way back to Elmsbrook, Mara felt the whispers in her mind growing louder, echoes of the past demanding to be heard. She knew their fight was far from over, but with each memory reclaimed, each soul freed from the forest's grasp, hope blossomed amidst the darkness. The village awaited them, fragile but alive. And Mara's promise burned brighter than ever. The village of Elmsbrook lay shrouded beneath a thick blanket of mist that clung stubbornly to every tree and rooftop. The soft gray haze muted the sounds of the waking world, wrapping the town in a silent stillness that felt almost sacred, or perhaps sinister. Mara stood at the edge of the woods, the damp chill settling deep in her bones. The twisted branch pulsed faintly in her palm, a slow, steady heartbeat entwined with the forest's own rhythm. Though the morning sun had risen hours ago, the fog refused to lift, swirling around the ancient pines like a restless spirit. The hollowing's presence was heavier here, its hunger echoing in every whisper of the mist. Mara's footsteps were muffled as she moved through the forest, each step a cautious dance on the moss-covered earth. Emily walked beside her, eyes wide and alert, clutching Mara's hand tightly. The promise Mara had made bound them both, an invisible tether stretching between past and present, memory and oblivion. As they ventured deeper beneath the canopy, the air grew colder, tinged with the metallic scent of damp earth and something darker, decay mingled with forgotten sorrow. The whispers intensified, threading through the mist like a symphony of voices caught between worlds. "Do you hear them?" Emily asked, voice barely above a whisper. Mara nodded. "They're calling. Lost memories, souls trapped in the forest's roots." Ahead, the trees opened into a clearing Mara did not recognize, though it felt ancient and familiar. In the center stood a stone altar, covered in tangled vines and weathered by time. Carved into its surface were symbols that glowed faintly with an otherworldly light, runes of binding and release. Mara approached cautiously, placing the twisted branch on the altar. The seed within pulsed brighter, sending tendrils of light weaving into the stone and spreading beneath the forest floor like veins of hope. "This place," Emily murmured. "It's a gateway." Suddenly, the mist thickened, swirling violently around them. From its depths emerged shapes, figures half-formed and shifting, their faces twisted in sorrow and fear. The forgotten had come again, their voices rising in a chorus of despair. "Remember us," they cried. "Remember who we were." Mara closed her eyes, feeling the weight of countless memories pressing against her mind. She began to chant the binding words, her voice steady despite the tremor in her heart. The runes on the altar flared, and the forest trembled. The Forgotten's forms solidified, their faces softening as they were released from their torment. One by one, they stepped into the light, a release that brought tears to Mara's eyes. But the peace was fleeting. A low growl rumbled from the shadows, and the forest around them darkened once more. From the mist emerged a towering figure cloaked in darkness, eyes burning with ancient fury. "You think you can undo what has been sown?" it hissed. "The hollowing is eternal. It feeds on the forgotten and the forsaken." Mara stood her ground, gripping the twisted branch tightly. "We will remember," she declared. "We will fight." Emily stepped beside her, courage shining through her fear. Together, they faced the embodiment of the forest's hunger, a force as old as the trees themselves, relentless and unforgiving. The battle was fierce and exhausting. Shadows clashed with light as Mara and Emily chanted the ancient words, the twisted branch pulsing with power. The figure writhed and screamed, but the bond between the sisters held strong, weaving a shield of memory and love. As dawn broke, the forest fell silent once more. The towering shadow dissipated into the mist, leaving behind a fragile calm. Breathless and shaken, Mara and Emily returned to Elmsbrook, knowing the Hollowing's hunger was quelled but never fully satisfied. The forest would always remember, and so would they. The battle for the past, present, and future was far from over. The days following the battle beneath the mist-laden canopy were filled with uneasy calm. The forest around Elmsbrook seemed to breathe easier, its shadows receding just enough to allow sunlight to kiss the moss-covered ground. But Mara knew better than to trust the fleeting peace. The Hollowing's hunger was a slow, simmering ember, one that could ignite without warning and consume everything in its path. Inside the cabin, Mara pored over old Thomas's journals, the brittle pages illuminated by the soft glow of a lantern. Each line of faded script held fragments of forgotten history, ancient rites, and whispered warnings about the Hollowing's true nature. It was a forest older than the village, older than the land itself, a living memory of pain and loss, bound to reclaim what had been lost through sacrifice and sorrow. Emily sat nearby, tracing patterns in the dust on the wooden floor. Her gaze was distant, haunted by the battles they had fought and the memories they had lost. "Do you think we'll ever be free?" Emily asked quietly. Mara looked up, determination etched in her features. "Maybe not," she said. "But as long as we remember, the Hollowing can't take everything." That night, as the village settled into uneasy slumber, Mara was roused by a soft tapping at the door. She opened it to find Lila standing in the moonlight, her pale eyes reflecting the stars above. "I've come with a warning," Lila said. "The Hollowing stirs in places we haven't yet seen. It seeks to unravel the threads that bind us all." Mara invited her inside, and Lila spoke of other villages, other forests, places where the Hollowing's shadows had begun to creep, claiming memories and silencing voices. "It's spreading," Lila said. "And soon, it will be unstoppable." The weight of this knowledge settled heavily on Mara. Their fight was no longer isolated to Elmsbrook. It was a battle against an ancient force sweeping across the land, threatening to erase the past and reshape the future. Determined to find answers, Mara and Emily prepared to journey beyond the familiar woods, seeking those who might hold the key to stopping the Hollowing for good. Before they left, old Thomas pressed a small, worn talisman into Mara's hand. "This will guide you," he said. "It holds a piece of the forest's heart, a link to the memories you protect." With heavy hearts but unyielding resolve, the sisters set out under a sky heavy with stars, stepping into the unknown. As they walked, the forest whispered around them, echoes of the past weaving through the night air, urging them onward. The path ahead was uncertain, fraught with danger and shadow. But Mara knew one truth above all. Memory was their weapon. And they would wield it until the hollowing was no more. Mara and Emily stepped beyond the familiar bounds of Elmsbrook, their footsteps sinking softly into the mossy earth beneath towering pines that stretched endlessly toward a darkening sky. The village they left behind was wrapped in silence, the fragile peace tenuous as a candle flickering against a growing storm. The weight of the talisman in Mara's hand was both a comfort and a reminder. This journey was more than a search for answers. It was a battle for the very essence of memory and identity. The forest thickened as they pressed onward, shadows lengthening like the fingers of forgotten ghosts. Every rustle in the underbrush, every distant crack of a branch, set their senses on edge. Emily's hand never left Mara's, the sisters bound by a shared determination and fear. "How far do we have to go?" Emily asked, voice low but steady. "As far as it takes," Mara replied. "Old Thomas said there are others who have faced the hollowing. We need to find them." Their path led them through tangled thickets and over ancient stone bridges that spanned misty ravines. The air grew colder, the scent of pine mingling with something darker, the sharp tang of decay and sorrow. The whispers returned, faint but persistent, threading through the night like strands of a forgotten song. At times, the voices seemed almost human, calling their names, weaving memories they'd thought lost. One evening, as twilight bled into darkness, Mara and Emily stumbled upon a clearing illuminated by the pale glow of lanterns hanging from gnarled branches. Figures moved silently within, cloaked and hooded, their eyes reflecting the firelight with cautious curiosity. "Travelers," one voice said, low and steady. Mara stepped forward, holding the talisman aloft. "We seek those who have fought the hollowing," she said. "Those who remember." A tall figure approached, lowering her hood to reveal silver hair and eyes sharp with knowledge. "You are not the first," the woman said. "But the hollowing grows stronger. Come, we have much to discuss." The sisters joined the circle around a crackling fire, the night alive with murmured stories and shared memories. The others spoke of lost villages swallowed by shadow, of loved ones consumed by forgetfulness, and of ancient bonds fractured by the forest's hunger. Each tale was a thread in a vast tapestry of loss and resilience. Mara listened, heart heavy but resolute. She realized their fight was part of something far greater, a struggle across time and space to preserve the fragile threads that wove the world's memory. The woman with silver hair, named Silva, explained that the talisman Mara carried was a shard of the original heart of the forest, a remnant of a time when the forest and the people lived in harmony. "To heal the hollowing," Silva said, "you must find the source, the place where memory first took root, and offer it the truth of your hearts." As the fire's glow danced on their faces, Mara and Emily shared a look of understanding. The journey ahead would be perilous, filled with shadows and sacrifice. But they were not alone. Under the watchful eyes of the stars, the sisters prepared to leave the circle and continue their quest, their spirits bound tighter by the stories and strength shared that night. The forest whispered around them, a chorus of hope and warning intertwined. The battle for memory was far from over. The night air was heavy with moisture as Mara and Emily left the warmth of the fire circle behind, their breaths rising in pale clouds beneath the ancient boughs of the forest. The path ahead was uncertain, a twisting maze of roots and shadows leading toward a place spoken of only in whispered legend, the source, the heart of the hollowing, where memory and oblivion intertwined beneath the veins of the earth. The talisman nestled against Mara's chest pulsed softly, its glow barely piercing the dense darkness. With every step, the forest seemed to grow quieter, the usual symphony of nocturnal life stilled as if holding its breath. The sisters moved in near silence, the weight of what lay ahead pressing down like the oppressive canopy overhead. As they pressed deeper, the air grew colder and the earth beneath their feet turned soft and spongy, soaked with the ancient waters of forgotten time. A faint luminescence began to seep from cracks in the soil, blue-green light pooling like liquid stars spilled across the forest floor. It was a sign they were drawing close to the source. Mara paused, crouching to touch the glowing earth. The light pulsed faintly beneath her fingertips, as though responding to her very presence. A low hum filled the air, not a sound but a vibration felt deep in the bones, a heartbeat that was older than the trees themselves. "This is it," Mara whispered. Emily nodded, eyes wide and wary. "I can feel it, like the whole forest is alive, waiting." Suddenly, the ground trembled, and the roots twisted and writhed, forming an enormous archway that led downward, into the very veins of the earth. The sisters steeled themselves, clasping hands tightly before stepping into the cavernous hollow below. The air grew thick with the scent of damp stone and ancient secrets. The walls of the cavern were lined with glowing runes, their light casting eerie patterns that danced like spirits along the rocky surface. Pools of liquid memory shimmered in the dark, fluid mirrors reflecting moments from lives long past, faces smiling and weeping in silent testament. "The source," Emily breathed. "It's beautiful, and terrifying." From the depths of the cavern emerged a figure, ethereal and shifting, its form composed of light and shadow intertwined. Its eyes held galaxies, stars born and dying in endless cycles of memory. "You have come far," the figure said, voice like 1,000 whispered stories. "But the hollowing is not simply a hunger. It is a wound, deep and ancient." Mara swallowed hard. "How do we heal it?" "By truth," the figure replied. "By offering your memories freely, without fear or regret. Only then can the forest be whole again." Mara felt a profound understanding settle over her. The forest's hunger was not a curse to be fought but a pain to be acknowledged, a wound needing the salve of remembrance and acceptance. With trembling hands, she took the talisman and placed it into the pool of liquid memory. Light surged forth, enveloping them in a warm glow that washed over every shadow, every forgotten sorrow. Visions flooded Mara's mind, her childhood laughter, the bond with Emily, the faces of those lost to the hollowing. She offered them without hesitation, the memories weaving into the light, stitching the wounds of the forest with threads of hope. As the last memory flowed into the source, the cavern pulsed with renewed life. The glowing runes brightened, roots above twisting and blossoming with fresh green leaves. The forest exhaled, a breath of release that swept through the trees and beyond. The hollowing was healing. Outside, dawn broke over Elmsbrook, the village bathed in golden light. The oppressive shadows had lifted, replaced by a vibrant, living energy that promised renewal. Mara and Emily emerged from the forest, forever changed but unbroken. The battle was won, for now. But the forest would always remember. And so would they. The first golden rays of dawn spilled through the gaps in the cabin's wooden walls, casting long, warm beams across the floor where Mara lay awake, eyes fixed on the ceiling. The events at the source had changed everything, or so she hoped. The forest outside seemed to breathe with renewed life, the oppressive silence replaced by the gentle rustle of leaves and distant bird calls. But inside her chest, an uneasy stirring persisted, like a shadow clinging stubbornly despite the light. Emily was still asleep in the next room, her breathing deep but restless. Mara's thoughts drifted to the memories they had offered, the ancient wounds they had tried to heal. The forest was healing, yes, but at what cost? That morning, Mara ventured outside, stepping into the vibrant world reborn from shadow. The village was alive with cautious smiles and tentative greetings. Neighbors who had once avoided one another now gathered in small clusters, sharing stories and rekindling bonds that the hollowing had threatened to sever. Yet Mara's gaze remained drawn to the forest edge, where the towering pines stood sentinel, their dark needles whispering secrets on the breeze. As she walked through the village square, she noticed old Thomas seated quietly by the fountain, his eyes closed as if listening to a melody only he could hear. "You seem troubled," Mara said, approaching him. Thomas opened his eyes slowly, a shadow of sadness flickering across his face. "The hollowing is healing, yes," he said softly. "But shadows never fully vanish. They linger, waiting for a moment to return." "What do you mean?" Mara asked. Thomas gestured toward the forest. "There are places where the darkness still breathes, pockets untouched by the light of memory. We must remain vigilant." That evening, Mara and Emily returned to the forest, drawn by an unshakable pull. The twisted branch, now dull but still warm in Mara's pocket, seemed to hum faintly. The air was thick with the scent of pine and something darker, the faint trace of old fear. As they moved deeper into the woods, the shadows grew longer, twisting into shapes that danced just beyond sight. The whispers returned, softer but more insistent, threading through the trees like a warning. Suddenly, a figure stepped from the shadows, a woman cloaked in tattered robes, her eyes glowing with an unnatural light. "You have healed much," the woman said, voice like wind through dead leaves. "But the hollowing's heart still beats. I am its keeper." The keeper's presence sent a chill through the air. Mara felt the forest tighten around them, roots shifting beneath their feet. "Why have you come?" Mara demanded. "To remind you that balance must be maintained," the keeper replied. "For every memory restored, a shadow must be embraced. The forest remembers both light and dark." Emily stepped forward, voice firm despite the fear in her eyes. "We fight to protect the memories that make us who we are. We will not let darkness consume us." The keeper smiled, a sad, knowing curve of her lips. "Then prepare, for the hollowing's shadow is long, and the night is never truly over." As the keeper vanished into the mist, Mara and Emily knew their journey was far from complete. The battle for memory was not a single victory but a continuous struggle, a delicate dance between light and shadow. They would need every ounce of courage, every memory they held dear, to face the lingering darkness waiting in the depths of the forest. The days that followed the encounter with the keeper passed like a slow, unsteady breath. Mara and Emily found themselves caught between relief and apprehension. The forest seemed to pulse with a restless energy, sometimes soft, like a lullaby, other times sharp and biting, as if warning them of a storm yet to come. The villagers of Elmsbrook tried to resume their lives, but the weight of the hollowing's memory lingered like a shadow stretching across the village square. One afternoon, Mara sat beside the ancient well in the heart of the village, tracing the worn stones with her fingers. The sun filtered through the leaves, casting dappled light on the cobblestones. She felt the talisman warm against her skin, a reminder that the battle was never truly over. Emily approached quietly, her eyes scanning the edge of the forest. "There's something in the clearing," she whispered. "I heard voices." Mara's heart tightened. The clearing was the place where the forest's hunger had first taken root, the place where the hollowing had clawed into their lives like a ravenous beast. "We should go," Mara said, standing and grabbing the twisted branch. Together, they made their way toward the clearing, the undergrowth thick and tangled. The air was heavy with the scent of pine and earth, and faint whispers echoed around them, like fragments of forgotten stories. As they neared the clearing, shadows twisted between the trees, elongated shapes that moved with unnatural grace. Mara's pulse quickened, her senses heightened. The forest was alive with whispers of fear and longing. In the center of the clearing, a flickering fire burned, casting eerie light on figures cloaked in gray. The firelight danced on their faces, pale, gaunt, eyes hollow and haunted. The forgotten, Emily breathed. Mara stepped forward, holding the branch aloft. The fire seemed to dim, the shadows recoiling. "Why have you returned?" Mara demanded. One of the figures stepped forward, a woman whose eyes shone with sorrow and fury. "The hollowing never leaves," she said. "We are its echoes, bound to the pain it causes. We remember what the living forget. We fight to protect memories," Mara replied. "To keep the forest from consuming us." The woman's gaze softened, but her voice was firm. "Memory is not always salvation. Sometimes, forgetting is mercy." The clearing fell silent, the fire's glow flickering against the encroaching dusk. Mara realized then that the struggle was not between light and darkness alone, but between the desperate need to remember and the equally powerful need to forget. The hollowing was a reflection of both, a wound that bled memories and a shadow that offered escape. As the figures faded into the gathering night, Mara and Emily stood alone in the clearing, the weight of their burden settling deeper into their bones. The forest was patient, its hunger endless. But Mara's promise burned bright, a beacon against the creeping dark. They returned to Elmsbrook under a sky thick with stars, their resolve strengthened yet tempered by the knowledge that the hollowing's shadows were as much a part of them as their memories. The fight was far from over. And the echoes in the clearing whispered still. The moon hung low and heavy over Elmsbrook, casting silver light that shimmered through the dense canopy of ancient pines. The village seemed smaller in the quiet night, houses shadowed by the towering trees that whispered secrets carried by the cool wind. Mara stood at the edge of the forest, the twisted branch warm in her palm, pulsing faintly like a heartbeat syncing with the rhythm of the earth. Her breath came slow and steady, yet inside, a tempest brewed, a storm of uncertainty and resolve. The warning from the forgotten in the clearing lingered in her mind. Memory and forgetting were two halves of the same coin, and the hollowing demanded a price neither the forest nor its people could escape. Mara felt the burden of the promise she had made, a vow to protect what remained while facing the relentless tide of oblivion that threatened to swallow them all. Beside her, Emily's eyes reflected the pale moonlight, fierce and unyielding despite the growing weight of shadows in her heart. "Do you think the hollowing can ever truly be stopped?" Emily whispered. "I don't know," Mara admitted. "But we have to try. Because if we don't, there won't be anything left to remember." That night, the forest seemed to breathe with a deeper rhythm, a pulse felt beneath the roots and rocks, like a slow tide rising beneath the earth's skin. Mara and Emily followed the trail deeper into the woods, guided by a faint glow emanating from the twisted branch. Their steps were soft but purposeful, each movement a defiance against the creeping forgetfulness. As they moved, the whispers became voices, fragmented memories woven through the rustling leaves and the sighing wind. Faces and places flickered at the edges of their vision, childhood laughter, lost friends, forgotten promises. Each memory was a fragile flame fighting against the encroaching dark. Suddenly, the ground beneath them shuddered. A wave of darkness surged upward like a tidal swell, swallowing the faint glow of the branch and cloaking the forest in an eerie shadow. The hollowing was waking, its hunger stirred by their intrusion. From the blackness emerged figures, faces pale and hollow, eyes devoid of hope. The forgotten pressed close, their voices rising in a mournful chorus. "Forget us," they pleaded. "Let the past slip away. Mara's heart ached as she grasped the branch tightly, drawing strength from the memories she held dear. She began the ancient chant, her voice steady and clear despite the growing darkness. Light surged from the branch, weaving through the roots and into the soil. The forgotten forms wavered, caught between despair and hope. One by one, they faded into the light, released from their torment. As the darkness receded, Mara and Emily stood breathless in the clearing. The tide of forgetting had crashed, but the light of memory had held. Yet, the Hollowing's hunger was patient and eternal. It would return, and the fight would go on. Back in Elmsbrook, dawn painted the sky in shades of pink and gold. The village stirred with cautious optimism, but Mara knew the truth buried beneath the morning light. The forest remembers all, the love and the loss, the light and the shadow. And so must they. The chill of early morning settled over Elmsbrook like a thin veil, wrapping the village in a fragile quiet that felt almost sacred. The sky above was a muted canvas of gray, the sun struggling to break through the dense clouds hanging low over the pines. Mara stood at the edge of the forest, the twisted branch warm in her hands, its glow faint but steady, a pulse beating in time with her own. Beside her, Emily shivered slightly, pulling her coat tighter against the cold, but her eyes held a fierce determination that never wavered. The events of the past weeks had etched lines of exhaustion and sorrow across their faces, yet their spirit remained unbroken. The village had begun to heal, but Mara knew the Hollowing's shadow still lingered, a dark pulse beneath the surface of everything. She had spoken with old Thomas that morning, his weathered hands gripping the edges of the table as he shared a revelation that chilled her to the bone. "There is a way," Thomas said quietly, "a pact older than the forest itself. A promise between the people and the Hollowing, sealed with blood and memory." A pact? Mara's voice was sharp with disbelief. "Yes," Thomas nodded solemnly. "Long ago, before the village was born, the forest demanded balance. The Hollowing was both protector and predator, it claimed what was forgotten, but it spared those who honored the pact." Mara's mind raced as she pieced together the fragments of history buried in Thomas's words. The promise she had made was only part of a larger, ancient agreement, one that had been broken and forgotten, unleashing the hunger that now threatened them all. Determined to understand more, Mara and Emily prepared to seek the source of the pact, a sacred grove said to lie beyond the oldest part of the forest, a place where memory and magic intertwined in a fragile dance. Their journey through the forest was slow and deliberate, the canopy above filtering the pale sunlight into shafts of gold and green. The air was thick with the scent of earth and pine, and the distant call of birdsong offered a fleeting sense of peace. Yet beneath the beauty, Mara felt the forest's restless pulse, a heartbeat entwined with the shadows that clung to the roots and rocks. As they reached the grove, a circle of ancient stones rose from the mossy ground, etched with symbols older than any living memory. The air shimmered with an unseen power, and Mara sensed the weight of countless promises made and broken. At the center of the grove stood a stone altar, worn smooth by time and ritual. Mara placed the twisted branch upon it, feeling the pulse of the Hollowing sink with the ancient magic flowing beneath the earth. A voice echoed through the clearing, soft, yet filled with an undeniable power. "Who comes to honor the pact?" Mara stepped forward, her voice steady despite the trembling of her heart. "We seek to restore balance, to remember what has been forgotten and protect what remains." The forest held its breath. From the shadows emerged a figure, tall and cloaked in woven vines, eyes glowing like embers. The keeper of the pact, guardian of the fragile truce between light and shadow. "The Hollowing hungers," the keeper said, "but it is bound by the promise of those who remember. To honor the pact, you must offer not only memory but sacrifice, a willingness to bear the burden so others may live." Mara and Emily exchanged a glance, the weight of the promise settling like stone in their chests. "We accept," Mara declared. The keeper nodded, extending a hand that glowed with the light of 1,000 stars. As Mara reached out to grasp it, a surge of warmth and power coursed through her, a binding force that linked her heart to the forest and to the hollowing itself. The forest sighed, the ancient magic weaving a new thread into the tapestry of memory and shadow. Returning to Elmsbrook, Mara and Emily felt the shift deep within the earth. The Hollowing's hunger was tempered, held at bay by the silent pact renewed. But the forest's whisper remained, a reminder that the balance was fragile, and the shadows were never far. The fight for memory was eternal. The days following the renewal of the pact passed in a hazy blur, the village of Elmsbrook stirring back to life with cautious hope. The oppressive shadows that once clung to the edges of the forest seemed to retreat, replaced by a gentle, almost reverent calm. Yet beneath this fragile peace, Mara felt an ever-present tension, as if the forest itself held its breath, waiting. Inside the cabin, Mara sat at the wooden table, the twisted branch resting before her like a sacred relic. She traced the faint carvings etched into its surface, symbols of binding, memory, and sacrifice. The talisman glowed softly in the dim light, a heartbeat in her palm that mirrored the pulse of the forest. Emily was nearby, poring over old Thomas's journals. Her fingers trembled slightly as she read passages about ancient rites, lost knowledge, and the burden carried by those who remember. "It's more than memory," Emily said quietly. "It's a responsibility." Mara nodded, eyes distant. "Every memory we protect, every story we tell, it's a thread holding the fabric of this world together." That night, the forest called again. This time, the summons was quieter, less urgent, but no less powerful. Mara and Emily stepped into the moonlit woods, the ground cool beneath their feet, the air alive with the scent of pine and earth. They walked in silence, the twisted branch glowing faintly as if guiding their path. The whispers of the hollowing were present but softened, a mournful lullaby woven with hope. Deep within the heart of the forest, they reached a place Mara had never seen, a small glade encircled by ancient trees, their branches intertwining like fingers reaching toward the sky. In the center lay a pool of still water, its surface reflecting the stars above. Mara knelt beside the pool, her reflection shimmering alongside the night sky. "This is where it all began," she whispered. As she spoke, memories surged through her, a flood of faces, voices, laughter, and tears. The joys and sorrows of generations, each moment precious and fragile. Suddenly, a figure emerged from the shadows, the keeper of the pact. Her eyes held a deep sadness tempered by wisdom. "The hollowing is not just a hunger for forgotten memories," she said. "It is a guardian of balance. To carry the weight of remembrance is to accept both the light and the shadow within." Mara listened, heart heavy but resolute. "What must we do?" she asked. The keeper smiled gently. "Remember. Share your stories. Let memory be a light that guides the lost home." Mara and Emily spent hours at the glade, sharing their memories aloud, their voices weaving a tapestry of light that shimmered against the darkness. The forest seemed to breathe in response, the hollowing's hunger easing with each story told. As dawn approached, Mara felt a profound peace settle over her, a fragile but enduring hope. Returning to Elmsbrook, the sisters knew their journey was far from over. The forest would always remember, and so would they. The burden of memory was heavy, but it was also a gift, a light against the darkness. And as long as stories were told, the hollowing could never consume them all. Night had fallen thick over Elmsbrook, draping the village in a blanket of deep indigo pierced by the cold glint of stars. The ancient pines surrounding the settlement stood tall and silent, their silhouettes casting long shadows that stretched like fingers across the soft earth. The moon hung low, pale and watchful, illuminating the forest with a ghostly silver light. Mara stood at the edge of the woods, the twisted branch clasped tightly in her hand. It pulsed faintly with a soft, blue glow, like a distant heartbeat in the depths of the night. Beside her, Emily's breath came in slow, deliberate puffs, visible in the crisp night air. They were both wrapped in layers of worn fabric, their eyes wide and alert, watching for the signs of the Halloween's restless stirring. The village had finally begun to heal from the relentless grip of the forest's hunger, but Mara knew the peace was fragile. The echoes of the forgotten still whispered beneath the surface, threading through the roots of every tree, lingering in the spaces between moments. Their memories were a fragile shield, and the Halloween was patient, endlessly weaving shadows into the fabric of the night. A sudden rustle from the underbrush made Mara's heart leap. She tightened her grip on the branch as a low, mournful sound drifted through the stillness, a call unlike any they had heard before. It was the voice of the forest itself, ancient and aching, filled with a longing that stretched beyond time. "It calls to us," Emily whispered. "A summons from the deepest roots." Together, they stepped cautiously into the shadows, moving deeper into the woods where the trees grew close, their branches tangled like the memories Mara and Emily fought to protect. The soft hum of the twisted branch grew stronger, guiding them through the thickening mist that swirled around their feet. As they ventured farther, the whispers grew louder, voices from long ago, fragmented and haunting. Faces flickered in the periphery, a child's laughter, a mother's lullaby, a lover's desperate plea. Each echo was a thread tugging at the edges of Mara's mind, weaving a tapestry of sorrow and hope. They reached a clearing bathed in silver light, where the air shimmered with an otherworldly glow. In the center stood a massive tree, its bark twisted and scarred, roots sprawling like veins into the earth. The tree's heart pulsed faintly, a rhythm that echoed the beat of the twisted branch. Suddenly, a figure stepped from the shadows, a woman clad in flowing robes woven from leaves and shadows, her eyes glowing with an ethereal light. "You have come," she said, voice like the rustle of autumn leaves. "The forest remembers you." Mara felt a shiver run down her spine. The woman was the guardian of nightfall, a being as old as the forest itself, keeper of memories lost and found. "Why do you call us here?" Mara asked, voice steady despite the tremor in her heart. "To remind you," the guardian replied, "that the battle between light and shadow is eternal. Every memory reclaimed feeds the Halloween, but every forgotten moment strengthens the darkness." Mara's gaze hardened. "Then how do we fight a hunger that grows stronger with every victory?" The guardian's smile was sad but resolute. "By embracing the paradox. Remember and forget, hold close and let go. The forest's heart beats not just with memory, but with the balance between. And if we fail?" Emily's voice broke the silence, a fragile thread of fear. "Then the shadows will consume all, and the forest will fall silent forever." The gravity of the guardian's words settled heavy on Mara and Emily. They realized that their fight was not only for themselves or their village, but for the very soul of the forest, a battle of endless tides between remembering and forgetting, light and dark. The night deepened, and the sisters stood beneath the ancient tree, feeling the pulse of the Halloween in their veins, the weight of memory pressing on their hearts. The twisted branch in Mara's hand glowed brighter, a beacon in the encroaching darkness. "We will fight," Mara vowed, voice firm with unshakable resolve. "We will remember. And we will protect." As the first light of dawn touched the horizon, the guardian of nightfall faded into the mists, leaving Mara and Emily alone with the whispered echoes of the forest. The Halloween was patient. And the night was far from over. The dawn broke slowly over Elmsbrook, the sky a soft wash of rose and gold that seemed to promise calm and renewal. But beneath this fragile morning, the forest whispered of unrest. The trees stood taller, their branches swaying as if stirred by an unseen wind, and the ground beneath the village trembled faintly, a subtle heartbeat echoing through the earth. Mara awoke before the sun fully rose, the twisted branch glowing faintly on the bedside table. The weight of the previous night's encounter with the guardian of nightfall pressed heavily on her mind. That lingering warning, the balance of light and shadow was fragile, and the Hollowing's hunger far from quenched, had settled like a stone in her chest. Emily joined her quietly, eyes shadowed with worry. Together, they prepared for the day, each step heavy with the knowledge that the peace they had fought so hard to achieve was tentative at best. "The forest is changing," Emily said softly as they stepped outside. "I can feel it. The shadows are gathering." Mara nodded grimly. "We need to be ready." Their first stop was the village square, where old Thomas had gathered a small group of elders and hunters. The usually bustling square was subdued, the villagers exchanging anxious glances as if expecting the forest to reach in and snatch them away. Thomas's weathered face was drawn tight, his usual calm replaced by a solemn urgency. "The Hollowing is stirring again," he announced. "Stronger than ever. We must unite if we are to withstand what comes." Plans were quickly made, patrols through the forest, protective wards placed around the village, and a gathering at the ancient stone circle to renew the pact once more. As the sun climbed higher, Mara and Emily joined the patrol through the edge of the woods. The forest seemed alive with tension. Every snap of a twig, every rustle of leaves put them on edge. The twisted branch pulsed brighter with each step, its heartbeat syncing with the rhythm of the forest's unrest. Suddenly, a chilling scream shattered the air, echoing through the trees like a banshee's wail. The patrol froze, hearts pounding as shadows twisted and coalesced ahead. From the darkness emerged figures, not fully human, their forms distorted and wreathed in mist. The Hollowing had birthed new horrors, creatures bound by forgotten memories and primal fear. The battle was fierce. Mara and Emily fought alongside the villagers, the glow of the twisted branch cutting through the shadows like a beacon. Each strike was a desperate fight to protect the memories that bound them, each fallen shadow a reminder of the Hollowing's insatiable hunger. The clearing where the fight took place became a battlefield of light and darkness, echoes of screams and the clash of wills reverberating through the night. When the last shadow dissolved into mist, silence fell heavy. The cost was clear: bruised bodies, shattered nerves, and the deep, aching knowledge that this was only the beginning. Back in the village, the elders gathered once more beneath the ancient stone circle. Mara and Emily stepped forward, the twisted branch glowing brighter than ever. "The Hollowing grows," Mara said. "But so does our resolve. We renew the pact, not just to survive, but to protect what makes us who we are." As the village joined hands, the forest around them seemed to pulse with renewed energy. The shadows retreated, but the tension remained, a gathering storm on the horizon. That night, Mara sat alone beneath the towering pines, the cool earth grounding her as she breathed deeply. The weight of memory was heavy, but it was also her greatest strength. The Hollowing would come again. It always did. But so would they. The morning fog clung to Elmsbrook like a shroud, thick and damp, muting the colors of the village and softening the edges of the world. The dense mist swirled lazily around the ancient pines, weaving between their gnarled roots and slipping into every corner like a restless spirit. To an outsider, the village might have seemed peaceful beneath the gray veil. But for Mara and Emily, the fog was a warning, an omen of the Hollowing's subtle advance. The night's battle had left its mark on the village. The lingering tension was palpable, an unspoken fear that pulsed beneath every glance and word. Yet amidst the unease, the villagers had drawn closer, united by a shared resolve. They gathered in small groups, whispering of ancient stories and forgotten lore, seeking strength in the threads of memory that Mara and Emily fought so fiercely to preserve. Mara woke before dawn, the cool air heavy with moisture. She wrapped a shawl around her shoulders and stepped outside, the damp earth soft beneath her boots. The twisted branch hung from her neck, its faint glow barely piercing the fog. As she moved toward the forest's edge, she felt the familiar pull, the forest's heartbeat syncing with her own. The hollowing stirred, restless and patient. Emily joined her silently, her breath visible in the cold air. "The fog," Emily said quietly, "it's like the forest is trying to hide something." Mara nodded. "Or warn us." Together, they stepped beneath the towering trees, the fog swallowing their footsteps and muffling their voices. The forest felt different here, older, deeper, as if guarding secrets that had slipped beyond even the hollowing's reach. As they ventured farther, the fog thickened, twisting into shapes that seemed almost alive. Shadows flickered at the edges of their vision, and faint whispers floated through the air, fragments of lost memories and half-forgotten dreams. Suddenly, the ground beneath them trembled. The mist parted to reveal a sunken clearing, its center dominated by a gnarled tree unlike any they had seen before. Its bark was cracked and scarred, roots sprawling like veins into the earth, and from its branches hung countless faded ribbons, tokens left by those who had sought to remember, to hold on against the hollowing's tide. Mara stepped forward, reaching out to touch one of the ribbons. As her fingers brushed the worn fabric, a flood of images surged through her mind, faces she had never seen, places she had never visited, memories that were not her own but felt impossibly familiar. The forest was speaking, not just to her, but through her. A sudden movement caught Emily's eye. From the fog emerged a figure, tall and cloaked in shifting shadows, eyes glowing faintly beneath the hood. "You seek answers," the figure said, voice echoing like a distant wind. "Yes," Mara replied, steady despite the chill creeping along her spine. "Then listen," the figure said. "For beneath the veil of fog lies the truth, a truth that binds memory and forgetting in a dance older than the trees." The figure gestured toward the twisted tree. "This is the heartwood," it continued. "The source of the hollowing's power and its curse. To heal the forest, you must confront the past buried beneath its roots and embrace the shadows that have taken root in its heart." Mara's breath caught. The weight of the revelation settled heavily on her. "How do we begin?" Emily asked. "By stepping into the roots," the figure said. "By facing the memories the forest has tried to bury." With a solemn nod, Mara and Emily approached the heartwood. As they touched the rough bark, the fog thickened, swallowing them whole and pulling them into a world where past and present collided, a place where memories danced with shadows, and the hollowing's true hunger awaited. The moment Mara and Emily pressed their hands against the ancient bark of the heartwood, the world around them shifted. The damp chill of the forest floor gave way to a surreal, shadowed realm beneath the roots, where light flickered like dying embers and time folded in on itself. The air was thick, heavy with the scent of earth and forgotten dreams, and the distant murmur of voices, whispers of lives long past, threaded through the darkness. They descended into this subterranean world, the roots above like twisted arches woven by an unseen hand. Each step was swallowed by the thick, loamy soil, their feet sinking slightly with every movement, grounding them to a place between worlds. "It's like the forest's memory itself," Emily murmured, eyes wide with awe and fear. "Alive and breathing." "And waiting," Mara added, voice steady but shadowed with uncertainty. Around them, the roots pulsed faintly, glowing veins of light that traced the hidden pathways beneath the earth. Faces flickered in the shadows, glimpses of those who had once lived, loved, and lost beneath the canopy above. The hollowing was not just a force of destruction, it was a guardian of memories, a collector of forgotten souls. As they moved deeper, the whispers grew louder, forming fragments of stories, laughter, sorrow, regret, hope, woven together in a tapestry of life and death. Suddenly, the path split, roots twisting like serpents into two diverging tunnels, one bathed in a soft, golden glow, the other steeped in deep, inky darkness. Mara hesitated, torn between the light of remembrance and the shadow of forgetting. "Which way?" Emily asked quietly. "Both," Mara replied, determination hardening her voice. "We can't ignore either." They stepped into the tunnel of light first. Warmth embraced them, memories blooming like flowers in spring. Here, they saw glimpses of joy, children playing beneath the sun, families gathered in laughter, the simple moments that wove the fabric of community. But beneath the beauty lurked fragility, the fleeting nature of these memories, vulnerable to the encroaching darkness. Next, they ventured into the shadowed tunnel. The air grew colder, heavy with the weight of sorrow and loss. Ghostly figures drifted silently, their eyes hollow, trapped between worlds. Here, the forest's hunger was raw and unyielding, a reminder that forgetting was as much a part of the cycle as remembering. Mara felt the pull of despair, the temptation to give in and let the shadows consume all. But Emily's grip on her hand was a lifeline, a promise that they would face the darkness together. Deeper still, the tunnels converged at a cavernous chamber where the heart of the hollowing pulsed like a great, wounded beast. The twisted branch in Mara's hand flared with radiant light, matching the rhythm of the cavern's eerie heartbeat. "This is where we must stand," Mara whispered. The chamber walls shimmered with the memories of countless lives, fragile threads of existence entwined with the forest's breath. "To heal this wound," Emily said, voice steady despite the weight of the moment, "we must offer everything, light and shadow alike." Together, they stepped into the pulsing heart, voices rising in an ancient chant, a plea for balance, a vow to hold memory and forgetting in fragile harmony. The chamber trembled as their voices echoed, the roots thrumming with renewed life. Light and shadow swirled around them, weaving a tapestry that stretched beyond time and space, binding past and present. When the chanting ceased, silence enveloped the chamber. The heavy weight lifted, replaced by a fragile peace, a promise that the forest's hunger could be soothed, not by battle, but by acceptance. Mara and Emily emerged from the roots changed, bearers of the forest's memory and its shadow, bound forever to the pulse of the hollowing. Back in Elmsbrook, dawn's first light broke through the trees, casting long rays across the village. The forest stood quiet, watching, waiting, but for the first time in a long while, it felt alive with possibility. The battle was not over. But hope had taken root. The first light of dawn crept softly over Elmsbrook, filtering through the dense canopy of pines like delicate threads of gold weaving their way into the shadows. The village stirred with the quiet sounds of life, chickens clucking in their coops, children's distant laughter, and the steady rhythm of feet on cobblestone. Yet beneath this peaceful veneer, Mara could still feel the tremor of what lay beneath, the restless heartbeat of the hollowing pulsing just beyond the veil of perception. The twisted branch, now worn smooth from countless touches, hung around Mara's neck like a beacon, a reminder of the path she and Emily had chosen, a path that twisted and turned like the veins of the forest itself. That morning, Mara and Emily met with the village elders beneath the great oak in the center of the square. The elders' faces were etched with lines of wisdom and worry, their eyes reflecting the burden carried by generations before them. Old Thomas spoke first, his voice gravelly yet steady. The Hollowing wound is vast, deeper than any of us imagined. But you too, Mara and Emily, you have walked the roots, touched the heart. That gives us hope. Hope, Mara echoed softly, feeling the weight of those words settle deep within her. The elders shared stories long forgotten, tales of the forest's cycles, the rise and fall of seasons, the dance of growth and decay. The Hollowing, they explained, was not simply a force of destruction but a guardian of balance, a necessary darkness to the light. But balance, Emily added thoughtfully, is fragile. It can tip with the smallest touch. Exactly, Thomas nodded. And now that you've opened the path, the forest's veins pulse with new life, and new danger. Determined to protect their home, Mara and Emily set out once more, this time following the pulse of the forest's veins, the hidden waterways beneath the earth where life and memory flowed intertwined. The journey was long and treacherous. The roots twisted beneath the surface like serpents, weaving labyrinthine paths through damp soil and ancient stone. The air grew heavy with the scent of moss and decay, and faint whispers curled around them like smoke. As they traveled, Mara felt the forest's heartbeat grow stronger, a steady rhythm echoing through the veins beneath their feet. The twisted branch pulsed in response, casting a warm glow that illuminated the darkness. But the deeper they ventured, the more Mara sensed the presence of something watching, a shadow lurking just beyond sight, patient and waiting. Suddenly, the ground shifted beneath them, and the forest seemed to exhale a breath heavy with ancient power. The walls of the earthen tunnel shimmered, revealing glimpses of memories long buried, faces frozen in time, moments of joy and sorrow intertwined in the forest's living archive. From the darkness emerged a figure, tall and regal, woven from vines and bark, eyes glowing with the light of 1,000 suns. The guardian of the veins. You walk the paths few dare to tread, the guardian said, voice like rustling leaves in a storm. The forest's veins carry its lifeblood, its memories and its shadows. What do you want from us? Mara asked, heart pounding but voice steady. Balance, the guardian replied. The hollowing grows because the veins are tangled. To heal the forest, the flow must be restored. Mara and Emily listened as the guardian revealed the truth of the forest's condition. The veins were clogged with forgotten pain and unspoken fear. To untangle the flow, they would have to face these buried memories, some sweet, some bitter, all necessary. The sisters steeled themselves for what lay ahead. Their task was clear: journey through the veins, confront the shadows, and restore the flow of memory and forgetting. It was a journey not just through the forest's depths, but through the very soul of Elmsbrook itself. With the guardian's blessing, Mara and Emily stepped into the pulse of the veins, ready to face whatever shadows awaited. The veins beneath Elmsbrook twisted and pulsed like the unseen arteries of a living creature, winding deep beneath the roots and stones, carrying with them the lifeblood of the forest's memory. Mara and Emily descended once more into this subterranean labyrinth, the air thick with the scent of damp earth and the faint metallic tang of forgotten tears. Each step echoed softly, swallowed by the cavernous space that hummed with ancient power. The twisted branch at Mara's neck pulsed with a steady glow, its warmth a tether to the world above, a fragile link between memory and oblivion. The deeper they traveled, the more the darkness seemed alive. Shadows writhed along the walls like whispered secrets, twisting and reforming, fleeting glimpses of faces lost to time. The voices rose and fell in haunting cadence, soft lullabies, desperate cries, half-forgotten promises, an orchestra of echoes that told the story of the Hollowing's hunger. It's like the forest itself is speaking, Emily murmured, clutching Mara's arm. Telling us what it has lost. Mara nodded, Her gaze fixed ahead as the passage opened into a vast chamber where currents of light and shadow wove like ribbons through the air. In the center of the chamber floated a shimmering pool, its surface dark yet reflective, alive with shifting images. The pool was the heart of the veins, a wellspring of memories and regrets pooled over centuries. "This is the currents of the lost," Mara whispered. "All the forgotten things flow here." As they approached, the pool rippled, drawing their reflections into a swirl of faces, loved ones lost, moments erased, lives forgotten. The Halloween's feast was on these memories, consuming them to grow stronger. Suddenly, the waters churned violently. From the depths emerged a figure, part shadow, part mist, its form shifting, ephemeral but terrifying in its intensity. "The Wraith of Forgetting. You come to reclaim what must be lost," it hissed, voice like wind through dead leaves. "Memory is pain. Forgetting is freedom." Mara squared her shoulders, holding the twisted branch aloft as it flared with radiant light. "Memory is life," she declared. "We fight not to forget, but to remember, and to protect." The wraith moved like a living shadow, swirling with anger and despair. It lashed out with tendrils of darkness, seeking to snuff out the glow of the branch. The chamber trembled as light and shadow clashed in a desperate battle. Emily stepped forward, chanting an ancient song learned from the elders, a melody woven from hope and sorrow. The words seemed to pierce the darkness, unraveling the wraith's form, weakening its hold on the currents. The battle waged for what felt like hours, the forest's heartbeat syncing with their own. Each strike of light pushed back the darkness, but the wraith's fury grew, feeding on their fear and doubt. Just when hope seemed to waver, Mara reached deep within herself, drawing strength from the memories of those she loved, her village, her family, the stories told beneath the stars. The twisted branch pulsed wildly, bursting forth with a wave of pure light that engulfed the wraith. With a final, agonized scream, the shadow dissolved into the currents, leaving the pool calm and clear once more. Breathless but resolute, Mara and Emily stood by the pool, the weight of victory mingling with the exhaustion of battle. "The currents are clearing," Emily said, voice soft but steady. "The veins are flowing again." "But this is only one battle," Mara replied, eyes scanning the shadows still lurking beyond the light. "The Halloween will not rest." As they ascended from the depths, the first rays of dawn filtered through the forest canopy. The air smelled fresher, lighter, the forest breathing a tentative sigh of relief. Back in Elmsbrook, the villagers gathered once more, their faces illuminated by hope and determination. Mara looked to Emily, a fierce resolve burning in her eyes. "We fight for every memory," Mara said. "Because as long as we remember, the forest can never consume us. The Halloween may hunger eternally, but so does the light of remembrance." The morning sun filtered weakly through heavy clouds as Mara and Emily stood at the edge of the village, gazing toward the thick forest beyond. Though the currents of the lost had been cleansed and the veins of the forest stirred with fresh life, Mara knew that the fight was far from over. The Halloween was patient, endless in its hunger, and the balance they had begun to restore was delicate, fragile as the thin veil of mist still lingering over the pines. The village had awakened to whispers, soft murmurs of shadows gathering, of cold winds that carried faint voices not meant for the living. The elders spoke in hushed tones about old warnings and long-forgotten omens, tales woven into the fabric of Elmsbrook's history, stories once dismissed but now echoing with renewed urgency. "The Halloween's shadow stretches farther than we see," Thomas said gravely, eyes scanning the horizon. "We've pushed back its hunger, but it is gathering forces, waiting for a chance to strike back harder." Mara's jaw tightened. She had felt it herself, a shiver in the forest's breath, a twisting of the trees' silent song. It was as if the very air was thickening, heavy with unseen menace. That evening, as dusk deepened into a starlit night, Mara and Emily set out again, this time with a small band of villagers, hunters, storytellers, and elders alike, each carrying a token of memory, a flame to light the way against the darkness. The forest welcomed them with an eerie stillness, the usual chorus of night creatures silenced beneath the oppressive weight of shadow. The twisted branch around Mara's neck pulsed faintly, a heartbeat steady and sure. It was their compass, their connection to the forest's fragile balance. They moved cautiously along a narrow path where the trees leaned inward, their branches intertwining like clasped hands, forming a vaulted ceiling of whispering leaves. From the depths of the woods came a low rumble, like the growl of some ancient beast waking from slumber. The ground beneath their feet vibrated subtly, the pulse growing stronger, matching the pounding of their own hearts. Suddenly, figures emerged from the darkness, twisted shapes that flickered like smoke, their forms barely human but undeniably alive. They were the Halloween's new emissaries, shadows born from forgotten memories and untold fears, their eyes burning with cold hunger. The group drew weapons, torches flaring to life as they prepared for the inevitable clash. Mara gripped the twisted branch, its light flaring as she chanted a protective word taught by the elders, words old as the forest, binding and powerful. The battle was fierce and desperate. Shadows moved like water, shifting and flowing, attacking from every direction. The villagers fought with courage and resolve, their memories fueling their strength, their flames pushing back the encroaching darkness. Mara found herself face to face with one of the shadowy figures, a wraith-like form with hollow eyes that seemed to pull at her soul. Raising the twisted branch, she unleashed a burst of light, searing through the darkness and forcing the shadow to recoil with a scream that echoed like breaking glass. But the hollowing was relentless. More shadows poured from the forest depths, their hunger unyielding, their forms shifting and multiplying. The battle waged on, a desperate dance of light and shadow beneath the towering pines. Amidst the chaos, Emily's voice rang out, a song of remembrance, woven with hope and defiance. Her melody pierced the darkness, unraveling the shadow's grip and bolstering the villagers' spirits. Together, Mara and Emily channeled the forest's pulse through the twisted branch, creating a radiant beacon that surged outward, cleansing the clearing of the Halloween's presence. When silence finally fell, the forest seemed to hold its breath. The shadows had retreated, but the scars of battle remained, broken branches, scorched earth, and the heavy weight of exhaustion on every heart. Mara looked around at her companions, faces grim but unbroken, eyes alight with fierce determination. "This is far from over," she said quietly. "The Halloween will return, stronger, hungrier. But so will we." As the group made their way back to Elmsbrook beneath a sky beginning to pale with the first hint of dawn, Mara felt the twisted branch pulse with a new intensity, a heartbeat joined with theirs, a promise of resilience in the face of the gathering storm. The forest remembered everything, its light and its shadows intertwined in an eternal dance. And Mara knew they would fight until the very last ember of memory was guarded against the Halloween's endless hunger. Night fell heavy over Elmsbrook, blanketing the village in darkness so complete it seemed the stars themselves had been swallowed by the thick canopy of ancient pines. The air hung still, oppressive with a silence that clawed at the edges of the soul, a silence unlike any Mara had known before. It was as though the forest itself was holding its breath, waiting. Mara sat by the fire outside her small cabin, the twisted branch glowing faintly at her chest. The warmth of the flames flickered against her face, but her eyes were fixed on the shadows beyond the light's reach. She felt the pull of the forest's heartbeat, the pulse that had become both a guide and a warning. Emily joined her, the weight of exhaustion visible beneath her eyes but overshadowed by a steely resolve. "Something is coming," Emily whispered, her voice barely audible. "The Hollowing's hunger is no longer patient." Mara nodded, her fingers tightening around the branch. "We've felt the hunger growing for weeks now. It's changing, learning." The village was restless, its usual nighttime chorus replaced by an uneasy quiet. Doors were barred, windows shuttered, and lanterns burned bright against the encroaching darkness. Stories and warnings passed from mouth to ear like a wildfire, each tale adding to the mounting dread. "The forest remembers," old Thomas said during the evening gathering. "And it's angry." As midnight approached, Mara and Emily led a small group of villagers deeper into the forest, the twisted branch their only source of light and hope. The path was narrow and winding, swallowed quickly by mist that curled around their ankles like living smoke. The deeper they ventured, the heavier the silence became, broken only by the soft crunch of their footsteps on fallen leaves and the occasional distant cry of a night bird. Suddenly, a sharp crack shattered the stillness, a tree limb snapping under unseen weight. Shadows flickered at the edge of their vision, coalescing into shapes both terrifying and otherworldly. The Hollowing's emissaries had come, but these were different, more cunning, more vicious. They moved like smoke, drifting through the trees with unnatural grace, their eyes glowing with cold malevolence. Mara raised the twisted branch high, its glow intensifying to a brilliant white. She began to chant the ancient word of protection, her voice steady despite the racing of her heart. The words flowed like water, binding light around them in a protective circle. The creatures surged forward, and the battle erupted into a chaotic dance of fire and shadow. Torches blazed, arrows flew, and the cries of both the living and the lost echoed through the night. Amid the chaos, Mara found herself separated from the group, the forest swallowing her in an eerie silence. The twisted branch pulsed wildly in her hand, casting long shadows that twisted and stretched like tendrils reaching out. Suddenly, a figure stepped from the darkness, tall and draped in tattered robes, face hidden beneath a hood. Its presence was both terrifying and sorrowful, a living embodiment of the Hollowing's hunger. "You fight for memories that will fade," it whispered, voice like the rustle of dead leaves. "But even memories die." Mara's breath caught, but she stood firm. "Memories are the light that guides us through the darkness," she said. "Without them, we are lost." The figure paused, then slowly reached out a hand, fingers brushing the twisted branch. A shock surged through Mara, a flood of visions, faces of those she had lost, moments she had fought to hold on to, the fragile threads of hope and fear entwined in the forest's pulse. The figure stepped back, the sorrow in its eyes deepening. "Then hold fast," it said. "For the Hollowing will break you if you let go." As it vanished into the mist, Mara felt a renewed strength, a burning determination to protect the memories that defined them all. Reunited with Emily and the villagers, Mara led them back through the forest as dawn's first light broke over the horizon. The battle had left scars, both seen and unseen, but their resolve was unshaken. The Hollowing's hunger was fierce, but so was their will to remember, to fight, and to survive. The dawn was slow to come, casting a pale, hesitant light over Elmsbrook. The village lay quiet beneath the weight of a restless night, the echoes of battle lingering like a fading dream. Mara stood by the edge of the forest, the twisted branch warm against her chest, its faint glow a reminder of the tenuous bond between memory and shadow. Despite the villagers' courage, the Hollowing's hunger had not waned. It had changed, evolving like the forest itself, more subtle, more cunning. It no longer relied solely on brute force, but on whispers and doubts, preying on fears hidden deep within the heart. Mara and Emily knew the fight was no longer just against shadows but against the very silence that threatened to consume them. Their journey that morning led them to the Whispering Hollow, a place spoken of only in hushed tones, a small glade deep within the forest where the trees bent inward, their branches tangled in a permanent embrace. The air here was thick with mist, and the silence was so profound it seemed to press against their skin. The elders warned that the hollow was a place where the forest's forgotten memories gathered, swirling like leaves caught in an endless wind. As they stepped into the glade, the temperature dropped sharply. The twisted branch pulsed with a deep, steady light, illuminating faint shapes moving just beyond sight, fragments of memories long buried, flickering like distant lanterns in the fog. Mara's heart quickened. This was the source of the hollowing's growing strength, the forgotten moments that had slipped through the cracks of time, feeding the hunger with their silence. A sudden breeze stirred the mist, carrying with it soft whispers that wound around Mara and Emily like a serpent's coil. The voices were fragmented, snatches of laughter, cries, and warnings. They felt both familiar and alien, like echoes of a dream slipping away upon waking. "We must listen," Mara said, voice barely above the whisper of the wind. "The forest speaks in memories." They followed the whispers to the center of the glade, where a pool of still water reflected the gray sky. As Mara gazed into its depths, the surface rippled, revealing visions, faces of those lost to time, moments of joy and sorrow suspended like fragile glass. The pool was a mirror of the forest's soul, fragile and fractured. Suddenly, the mist thickened, and a figure emerged, a woman draped in robes woven from shadow and light, her eyes shining with ancient wisdom. "I am the keeper of the hollow," she said softly. "I tend the memories that others have forgotten, the stories lost between breaths. The hollowing feeds on these silences, but they can also be healed." Mara felt a chill as the keeper's gaze bore into her. "How do we heal what has been broken?" Emily asked, voice trembling. "By speaking the stories aloud," the keeper replied. "By sharing the light hidden in the shadows, we restore balance." Together, Mara and Emily began to tell the stories of their village, of love and loss, courage and fear, moments both small and profound. Their voices wove through the hollow, stirring the memories like leaves caught in a gentle wind. The mist around them shimmered and brightened, the hollow's silence broken by the sound of remembrance. But the hollowing was not defeated. From the edge of the glade, shadows gathered, twisted shapes born of forgotten fears, drawn to the light of the stories. A fierce battle erupted beneath the ancient pines, the clash of memory and shadow echoing through the forest. Torches blazed, arrows flew, and the villagers fought with desperate determination. When the last shadow fell, the hollow stood transformed, no longer a place of silence, but a sanctuary of light and memory. The forest seemed to breathe anew, its pulse steady and strong. Mara and Emily returned to Elmsbrook, the twisted branch glowing softly, a beacon for the stories yet to be told. The fight was far from over, but the forest's heartbeat had changed. And so had they. The air was thick with the scent of damp earth and pine resin, a smell that wrapped around Mara like a familiar cloak as she stood once more at the edge of the forest. The sun was a dim orb behind heavy clouds, casting a muted light over Elmsbrook, a village weary but unbroken, its people bound by memories both fragile and fierce. Mara's fingers brushed the twisted branch resting against her chest, its steady pulse a reminder of the journey that had brought them here, and the battle yet to come. For weeks, the hollowing had stretched its reach, testing the village's defenses, probing the fragile balance Mara and Emily had fought so hard to restore. Shadows lurked just beyond sight, whispers of forgotten fears and lost moments that threatened to unravel everything. But Elmsbrook had not stood alone. The villagers, bound by stories shared beneath the stars and flames, had become guardians of memory, each flame a beacon against the encroaching darkness. Mara and Emily gathered the village at the ancient stone circle, where the earth's power was strongest, and the line between past and present thinnest. The stones were worn by time, etched with symbols that spoke of cycles, birth and death, memory and forgetting. Here, they would confront the Hollowing's heart, the source of its endless hunger. Tonight, Mara began, voice steady and clear, we face the Hollowing not with fear, but with remembrance. Every story told, every memory shared, is a spark against the dark. The villagers formed a ring, hands joined, flames held high. Mara and Emily stepped to the center, the twisted branch glowing brighter with each breath, its light weaving through the air like threads of pure energy. The forest around them seemed to lean in, the ancient pines silent witnesses to the moment. Suddenly, the ground trembled, and a chill swept through the clearing. From the shadows emerged a towering figure, an embodiment of the Hollowing's hunger, its form shifting and writhing, eyes burning with cold fire. It was the last ember of the darkness, a tempest of forgotten sorrow and rage. Mara raised the twisted branch, its light flaring in a brilliant surge that cut through the darkness. She began to chant the ancient words of binding, her voice strong and unwavering, echoing through the forest. Emily joined, her song weaving around Mara's words, a melody of hope and defiance. The figure roared, tendrils of shadow reaching out to snuff the light. But the villagers' voices rose, a chorus of memories, laughter, tears, courage, that wrapped around the Hollowing like a net of flame. The battle was fierce, a clash of light and shadow that shook the very ground beneath them. Mara felt the pull of despair, the temptation to yield, but the warmth of the twisted branch and the strength of the villagers' stories held her fast. With a final surge of energy, the light from the branch burst forth, enveloping the Hollowing in a radiant blaze. The shadow screamed, fracturing into shards that scattered like dying stars, dissolving into the night. Silence fell, deep and profound. The forest seemed to exhale, its heartbeat steady and strong once more. The vines and roots shimmered with renewed life, the air alive with the scent of new beginnings. Mara lowered the branch, its glow soft but steady. Around her, the villagers smiled, tired but triumphant. The Hollowing is no more, Emily said, voice thick with emotion. But our fight to remember never ends. As dawn broke, painting the sky with strokes of pink and gold, Mara looked out over the forest, ancient, alive, and forever intertwined with the memories it held. The twisted branch pulsed gently, a lasting ember of light against the dark. In Elmsbrook, stories would continue to be told beneath the stars, flames flickering in the night, each one a promise that memory would endure. And so, the forest remembered.